Introduction asterisk. Many viewers lament the valiant yet tragic demise of Lady Lyanna Mormont in Game of Thrones. However, in this narrative, had she commanded not merely 62 warriors, but rather an army magnified by 3 zeros. The young Daisy finds herself transmogrified into the elder sister of Lady Lyanna, Daisy Mormont. Though she may lack certain attributes, she is endowed with an extraordinary legacy, the martial prowess of Li Cunxiao. Thus begins her enthralling journey, to shatter Westeros, to ascend as the Emperor of the Empire, to sever the shackles of divine will, to become the mentor of humanity, and perhaps a savior of beauty? Chapter 1. The Awakening of the Blood Sea. 1. 289 AC. It has been 6 years since King Robert ascended the Iron Throne, and the Iron Island's Balon Greyjoy has ignited a rebellion. These self-proclaimed Ironborn, akin to a school of sharks sensing blood, seize the opportunity while King Robert's main fleet is still in preparation, and while the Norse forces, led by Eddard Stark, are gathering with the Royal Navy, brazenly launching an assault on the unguarded northern coast. Bear Island, the colossal bear rising from the icy shores, becomes the first target. As the night deepens, the frigid waves crash against the jagged rocks. Ghostly longships pierce through the surging tide, violently colliding with the shore. Their hulls, slick with seaweed and ice shards, are adorned with the grotesque carvings of sea monsters and drowned gods, appearing as phantoms from the abyss beneath the dim starlight. Those who have perished do not truly die. Amidst fervent howls, the Ironborn leap from their longships, wading through the biting cold waters, surging onto the beach. Armed with axes and steel swords, their chainmail and scale armor glisten dully, their savage faces etched with an insatiable thirst for plunder and bloodshed. The air thickens with the briny scent of seawater, the metallic tang of rust, and a primal essence of barbarism. Malin, the second son of Balon Greyjoy, has devised the drowned god's trident strategy, striking at Bear Island like a venomous serpent. A feigned assault on the largest dock to draw attention, while an elite squadron rushes directly towards the heart of the island, the Bear Hall. Meanwhile, the remaining hundreds scatter like a plague, wreaking havoc across the island, sowing terror and dismantling resistance. At this moment, 11-year-old Daisy Mormont, the elder sister of Ser Mormont, is closely following her mother, Lady Maege Mormont, the acting lord. Despite her tender age, Daisy's stature far surpasses that of her peers, even exceeding most adult men. With broad shoulders, a narrow yet firm waist, and long, powerful limbs, she is enveloped in a thick bear fur cloak, resembling a resilient sapling thriving in the harsh, frozen earth, tall and robust, every inch of muscle imbued with vibrant strength. The fierce wind tousles her silk-like black hair, whipping it against her slightly pale cheeks, a result of tension and cold. Yet, her exquisitely defined features are illuminated by a pair of remarkably bright eyes, devoid of any childhood timidity, reflecting a gravity beyond her years. Quick, to the crypt. Hurry, do not look back. Lady Maege's voice, hoarse yet resonant like a war drum, strives to overpower the howling wind and the distant, approaching cries of agony and the clash of arms. She stands like a mother bear cornered, placing herself as a barrier between the terrified islanders and the encroaching danger, directing the crowd towards the ancient crypt, the last refuge of Bear Island, sturdy and concealed, capable of withstanding an immediate attack. Women clutching shivering infants, elderly men leaning on canes, children so frightened that they have forgotten to cry. Panic ensues as they jostle and crowd together. This way, do not shove. Support the elderly and the children. Daisy's voice rings clear and steady, cutting through the chaos, possessing a peculiar, soothing power. Her towering figure becomes the most reliable anchor as she strives to assist an elderly fisherman who has stumbled and wears a face of despair. The old man's gnarled hands, marked by frostbite and the passage of time, grasp her slender yet resilient arm as if it were the last piece of driftwood for a drowning soul. Daisy can distinctly feel the coldness and uncontrollable tremors emanating from those hands. She grips back firmly, her tone resolute. Do not fear. Follow my mother. We shall be safe. However, the zealots of the drowned god arrive more swiftly and ferociously than anticipated. Like an avalanche erupting, the clamorous cries surge forth, swiftly engulfing the sounds at the rear of the fleeing crowd. The militia of Bear Island, mostly common men wielding fishing forks and hunting bows, charge forth, brandishing harpoons, rusty swords, or even merely sticks bound with stones, their eyes ablaze with fury as they rushed to meet the foe. They possessed no fine armor, no standardized weaponry, but only an ardent resolve to defend their homeland and the fierce bravery inherited from House Mormont. For Bear Island, Mormont forever. Flesh and blood erect a barrier against the tide of iron and blood. Crack! Bone spears shatter upon the Ironborn steel axes, splintering into fragments. Fishing forks pierce leather armor, yet cannot withstand the fierce swords that follow. The cacophony of screams, roars, clashing weapons, and blades piercing flesh intertwine to compose the most brutal symphony of war. The heavy scent of blood thickens, nearly solidifying, suffocating those present. Lady Maege suddenly pulls Daisy behind her, her sword drawn, its gleaming blade reflecting her resolute and unyielding visage in the flickering firelight. "Stay close to me. Under no circumstances should you leave my side." Her voice is imbued with an irrefutable command. An Ironborn, his face adorned with a twisted octopus tattoo, roars as he breaks through the fragile defense, his heavy battle axe slicing through the air with a piercing shriek, aimed directly at Maege's head. With a fierce glint in her eyes, Maege sidesteps, her sword moving like a striking serpent, precisely penetrating the gap in his chainmail, thrusting deeply into his side. The Ironborn emits a muffled groan of pain, staggering back, yet more enemies swarm forward like vultures drawn to carrion. Maege fights fiercely, her sword creating a shimmering screen of defense. Yet, she is ultimately overwhelmed. Her cloak is slashed open in multiple places, dark animal blood quickly soaking through the deep red fabric. Her breaths grow labored, and with each block, her arms ache intensely. "Mother!" Daisy's heart clenches, her grip tightening around a short sword for self-defense, her knuckles turning white from exertion. A powerful impulse compels her to rush forward and fight alongside her mother. Yet Maege's occasional glances, sharp as ice, pin her in place. It is both protection and command. At that moment, the crowd parts as if moved by an invisible force, and a figure, as imposing as an iron tower, strides forth. The two-handed axe he wields is more than twice the size of an ordinary battle axe, its dark red sheen glistening, the congealed blood of Bear Islanders staining its blade. He is the deputy commander of this landing force, the infamous Darro, a brigand known for his cruelty and immense strength. Lady Maege engaged in a fierce struggle, employing her years of honed swordsmanship and indomitable spirit, yet the swift depletion of her strength and the increasing wounds upon her body inevitably slowed her movements. A moment's delay in her defense allowed the heavy axe blade, accompanied by a suffocating rush of wind, to descend with tremendous force. Thud! The sickening sound of bone fracturing echoed clearly. The axe blade embedded deeply into Lady Mage's left shoulder, blood gushing forth like a torrential flood, staining half of her body and the snow beneath her feet of vivid crimson. "No!" Daisy's scream pierced the air, her pupils dilating in horror. Lady Mage's body jolted violently, her complexion drained to a ghastly pallor, as pale as parchment. Yet in her eyes, there was no fear of death, only an overwhelming sense of reluctance, resoluteness, and the deepest of entrustments. Summoning her last ounce of strength, she pierced through the chaos of the crowd with her gaze, fixing it firmly upon Daisy's face, and cried out hoarsely, "Run! Daisy! Survive! Take your sister! Survive!" In the next moment, a cruel delight spread across Darro's face as he wrenched back the massive axe, drawing forth a gruesome spray of blood and flesh. He then twisted his wrist, the axe slicing through the air with an even more blinding and lethal gleam, aimed horizontally at Lady Mage's vulnerable neck. This strike was determined to sever the head of the acting lord of Bear Island. Time seemed to freeze at that instant. Daisy's world fell silent, dominated solely by the bloodied silhouette of her mother and the ominous approach of the executioner's axe. A paralyzing terror, an overwhelming rage, and a heart-wrenching refusal surged within her like molten lava beneath a volcano, nearly bursting her tender soul apart. "No, this cannot be. I have only just arrived in this world. I have only just lamented the fate of the Bear family. I have yet to truly know this mother in name only. A computer malfunction. Have I become Daisy Mormont? Is this my conclusion? Like a lamb awaiting slaughter, helplessly witnessing the protector perish, only to silently fade away upon this frigid shore? What I ist?" The soul of the boy known as Dai, she from a later era fused with the grief and despair of the current bear girl, Daisy Mormont, reaching a boiling point. Boom! It was as if the cataclysmic explosion of the universe echoed within her mind. Countless shattered orbs of light, entwined with the deafening clamor of clashing metal, the whinnies of war horses and the roars of military formations, surged forth like a tidal wave of stars, violently crashing into the depths of Daisy's, or rather, the newly formed soul of she and Daisy, consciousness. A singular, resplendent orb erupted. No longer did she behold the icy, blood-soaked shores of Bear Island, but rather a sky filled with yellow sand and a blood-red setting sun. A colossal shadow loomed, akin to a demigod descending upon the earth, clad in dark, heavy armor, wielding a terrifying weapon known as the Yuan spear. Adorned with vicious barbs, he roared, his voice reverberating across the land, a human tempest cutting through legions of foes. Wherever he passed, chaos ensued. Men fell, blood and flesh scattered. Each strike was simple, direct, and ferocious, embodying the purest aesthetic of power, shaking mountains and driving the heavens. It was an invincible martial will, one that looked down upon the world, breaking through cunning with strength and affirming the path through slaughter. His name, seared into the depths of Daisy's very soul as if with a red-hot branding iron. General Li Cunxiao. Kings may not rival Ba, but none can surpass Li. The scene whirled rapidly, the final tableau culminating in a tragedy that would send shivers down one's soul. 5 fierce steeds galloped wildly in 5 different directions amidst the mournful sound of horns. Iron chains as thick as a bowl tightened instantaneously. The body that had once reigned invincible over the world, standing firm against countless armies, was torn apart by an irresistible force. Blood and flesh flew, bones shattered. The profound anguish and overwhelming resentment, transcending the corporeal realm, erupted into a roar that seemed to emanate from the depths of hell, piercing Daisy's every ounce of consciousness like countless burning steel needles. Ugh! Daisy emitted a silent, anguished wail on a spiritual level, her entire consciousness projection twisting violently on the brink of disintegration. Yet, at that moment, the remnants of Li Cunxiao's martial will converged perfectly with her instinct for survival and the fury of revenge. Pain, excruciating pain, not merely a spiritual upheaval, but her very body seemed to be torn and reformed by an unseen force. Every muscle, every bone, felt as if it were being hammered and scorched by raging flames. Yet amidst this ultimate agony, an unprecedented power awoke within her, like a dormant volcano erupting. The courage to break through 1,000 armies. The flow of time in the outside world seemed to revert to normal. The massive axe was now less than a foot from Lady Mage's neck. In the 3rd chapter of the Bear Island Empress, titled Awakening in the Sea of Blood, Daisy's once tear-filled eyes, reflecting fear and sorrow, suddenly transformed into a frigid, profound gaze. All traces of fragility, hesitation, and dread evaporated in an instant, replaced by an overwhelming indifference and murderous intent that towered above all living beings. Her movements were as swift as a phantom. With a sweeping glance, she locked onto a common longbow made of yew and a quiver of arrows that had fallen to the ground nearby, remnants of a fallen militiaman. Bending down, she gathered the bow, nocked an arrow, and strung it with a fluidity that suggested she had rehearsed this 1,000 times, imbued with a primal and fierce rhythm. The hunting bow, which ordinarily required considerable strength to draw, was effortlessly pulled into a full arc in her hands, as if it were a mere toy. The bowstring reverberated, echoing like the whisper of death. The first arrow, whoosh, it transformed into a near-invisible bolt of black lightning, slicing through the air with a piercing shriek. Thud! The sound of a blade piercing flesh was both muffled and clear. Just as Darro was poised to complete his beheading, his body stiffened abruptly, the massive axe precariously halting inches from Lady Mae's neck. In disbelief, he lowered his gaze to find a bloodied arrowhead protruding from his thick throat. Blood gushed forth like a small stream. He opened his mouth, attempting to emit a gasp, but only a spray of blood emerged. His enormous frame crashed backward, splattering mud and blood in its wake. In that fleeting moment, the once tumultuous battlefield fell into an eerie silence. All the Iron Men who witnessed this scene wore expressions of ghostly terror. The deputy commander had been slain in an instant by an arrow. Who was responsible? Their eyes instinctively turned toward the source of the arrow. There, they beheld a sight they would never forget. Amidst the swirling snow and wind stood a figure, tall and defiant, seemingly more than a mere girl. Her raven hair danced wildly, and her strikingly fierce visage bore splatters of blood. enhancing her beauty with an aura of lethal grace. Once again, she drew her longbow, string taut, with 3 arrows poised. No, it was not that 3 arrows were released simultaneously. Her movements were simply too swift. The second arrow, the third arrow, the fourth arrow. Daisy's gaze was devoid of warmth. Her breath eerily steady, as though she were not engaged in killing, but rather participating in an elegant hunt. Withdrawal of the arrow, knocking, drawing, and release. Her motions flowed seamlessly, leaving only the remnants of her speed in their wake. The sound of the bowstring reverberated in a rapid succession, akin to the urgent drumbeats of death. Whoosh! A nearby Iron Man, having just raised a horn to sound the call for aid or alarm, instantly found a blood hole at his temple, the horn slipping silently from his grasp. Whoosh! Another Iron Man, attempting to rally his comrades to raise makeshift shields, was pierced through the heart by an arrow. The ferocity in his eyes extinguished in an instant. Whoosh! A third, brandishing a dagger to slaughter civilians, felt an arrow pierce his thigh, collapsing to the ground with a cry of agony. Precise, efficient, ruthless. Every arrow inevitably claims a life or utterly strips an enemy of their combat prowess. Panic, akin to the most lethal of plagues, surged swiftly among the remaining pursuers. They were unafraid of a desperate fight, yet confronted with this invisible, intangible, and divinely precise slaughter. Primal terror seized their hearts in an instant. Witchcraft. It's the sorceress. Hide quickly. Eliminate that girl. Some recoiled in despair, others sought refuge. While a few fierce-eyed individuals charged toward Daisy, a chilling smile curled at the corners of Daisy's lips. Excellent. Their attention has been drawn away, ensuring greater safety for her mother and the refugees. She did not budge an inch, merely drew her bow once more. The 5th, 6th, and 7th arrows flew. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 3 foremost Iron Men fell as if struck by an invisible hammer, collapsing in bizarre contortions, each pierced in vital spots by quivering arrows. The 8th arrow. An Iron Man attempting to hide behind a rock was struck by a cleverly angled arrow, which bypassed the stone's edge and pierced through his neck with unerring accuracy. The 9th arrow. An Iron Man, sensing peril, turned to flee toward the sea, only to have a blossoming spray of blood erupt from his back, collapsing into the icy waters, never to rise again. The 10th arrow. A cunning Iron Man seized an injured, fallen militia member as a shield, attempting to close the distance. Daisy narrowed her eyes, made a slight adjustment to the arrowhead, and released. The arrow, as if endowed with sentience, grazed the militia member's scapula and found its mark in the eye socket of the Iron Man behind him. 10 arrows, 10 lives, either slain or rendered utterly incapacitated. The entire ordeal transpired in the span of but a few breaths. The once formidable Iron Men pursuers gazed in sheer terror at the girl standing with her bow, as if beholding a Valkyrie from ancient myth or a vengeful spirit emerging from the depths of the abyss. She stood there, emanating a murderous intent more chilling than the frigid sea. Daisy slowly withdrew the 11th arrow from her quiver, her movements deliberate, yet instilling immense psychological pressure upon the remaining Iron Men. Her icy gaze swept over each survivor, as though appraising a herd of livestock destined for slaughter. She did not immediately release this arrow. Instead, she proclaimed with a clear, cold voice, imbued with a strange penetrating force, as if declaring judgment, "Scum of the Iron Isles. Who permitted you to tread upon the lands of my Mormont? Who granted you the audacity to harm my mother?" Each word struck like a hammer upon the fraying nerves of the Iron Men. The bowstring in her hand was drawn back once more, the creaking sound becoming the most terrifying harbinger of death in that moment. The surviving Iron Men were utterly paralyzed with dread. It is uncertain who first let out a cry, but the remaining individuals could no longer afford to concern themselves with the glory of the submerged deities or the plundered wealth. They discarded their weapons and, like stray dogs bereft of their homes, scrambled back toward the coast from whence they came, lamenting the absence of 2 legs. Daisy did not pursue them. She merely coldly observed their retreating figures. Only when the last of the Ironborn vanished behind the rocks did she slowly lower her longbow. At that moment, the survivors of Bear Island, along with the wounded yet still breathing militia, seemed to awaken from an incredible dream. They gazed at the proud silhouette of the girl standing amidst the snow, at the fallen bodies of the Ironborn that lay at her feet, and at the gravely injured yet miraculously surviving Lady Maege behind her. It was unclear who led the way, but the suppressed sobs transformed into choked breaths of survival, which then morphed into low murmurs of gratitude and reverence. "It is Miss Daisy who has saved us. Bless the old gods. Long live House Mormont." A few women, regaining their composure, hurried forward to carefully assist Lady Maege, who was disoriented from excessive blood loss and excruciating pain, using clean strips of cloth to staunch her bleeding. Daisy approached her mother, knelt down, and gently grasped Lady Mage's uninjured, cold hand. Feeling the overwhelming warmth and determination emanating from her daughter's palm, Lady Mage's vacant gaze began to shimmer with a flicker of light, her lips moving as if she wished to speak. Ultimately, she merely tightened her grip on Daisy's hand. Her eyes filled with a complex array of emotions: shock, relief, concern, and the glimmer of hope for the family's future. Daisy regarded her mother's pallid face, and the violent fury that had boiled within her due to the slaughter gradually subsided, replaced by a heavy sense of responsibility. She lifted her gaze toward the faint glow of fire emanating from the great hall, toward the distant sounds of battle at the docks, and toward the land that belonged to House Mormont, now stained with blood and flame. Her gaze pierced through the snowstorm, becoming extraordinarily sharp and resolute. The Ironborn's assault was merely the beginning, and she, Daisy Mormont, inheritor of the blood of Bear Island and the soul of a fierce warrior from another world, would no longer be a vassal nor a protected one. This baptism of blood and fire marked the day of her awakening, as well as the commencement of the Ice Sea Valkyrie's ascent onto the stage of Westeros. Clearing the battlefield, tending to the wounded, and assessing the losses, Daisy rose to her feet. Her voice, no longer youthful but imbued with an undeniable authority, resonated clearly in the ears of every survivor. Those who can still fight, take up your weapons and follow me. The shame of Bear Island must be washed away with the blood of the Ironborn. Our battle has only just begun. In the depths of the Mormont family tomb, nearly 300 souls were crammed together, a congregation of survivors led by Lady Marjorie and the women, children, and wounded who had originally sought refuge there. The atmosphere was stifling, each breath laden with the tomb's characteristic chill and the pungent mingling of blood and sweat. People huddled in the shadow of their ancestors' eternal slumber, fear weaving an invisible web around every trembling spirit. Only a few torches flickered in the crevices of the walls, casting an erratic glow that illuminated the pale, despairing faces, rendering them ghostly. A massive bronze shield, hastily dragged from the burial platform, was precariously stacked to form a rickety barricade. These shields, once belonging to deceased lords, were now tarnished with verdigris, the indistinct, menacing bear emblems seeming to stir to life in the dancing light, their cold metallic gaze fixed upon the struggles of their descendants on the brink of death. In this abyss of despair, old blacksmith Donine was the only heart still roaring with life. His makeshift forge, transformed from a massive stone sarcophagus of uncertain lineage, blazed with the burning remnants of funerary wooden coffins, flames leaping and crackling with vigor. Donine's hands, scarred and calloused from years of toil, wielded a heavy stone hammer that struck fiercely upon the glowing copper blocks. These blocks, invaluable relics of exquisite bronze vessels, intricate candlesticks, and even a fragmentary lordly crown symbolizing power and glory, were now being forged under Donine's brutal yet precise blows into crude but lethal arrowheads and spear tips. Each strike erupted in a brilliant shower of sparks, like dying stars cascading onto the cold ground, briefly dispelling the thick shadows in the corners while searing the numbed nerves of those nearby. "Quick, pass the sharpened ones," Donine rasped, his voice overpowering the roar of the bellows and the sound of the hammer. Sweat mingled with soot streamed down his furrowed face, the flames reflecting an almost frenzied intensity in his eyes. This was his final battlefield, where he fashioned weapons of resistance against the specter of death. Yet, the footfalls of death grew ever closer. Bang, bang, bang. A heavy thudding resonated suddenly from above the tomb, accompanied by the sound of falling debris and frozen earth, striking the bronze shields with a jarring thud that sent a wave of panic through the crowd. Every heart leaped to the throat, fearful gazes converging upon the narrow vent at the side of the arch. The vent. They are going to break through the vent, a young militia member stammered, his grip on a sharpened stick trembling like a leaf in the wind. The vent, once a vital conduit for air circulation within the tomb, had now become its most perilous vulnerability. Outside, sturdy logs were battering relentlessly against the rusted iron grate that covered it. With each impact, the long-neglected iron bars emitted a grating groan that sent shivers through the teeth, while fragments of stone tumbled through the crevices. The indistinct yet malevolent curses and maniacal laughter of the iron folk seeped through the gaps, akin to venomous serpents flicking their tongues in the darkness, gnawing at the last vestiges of courage among the multitude. "Hold the line. Brace the barricade with your spears." An old veteran, one arm shattered and hastily bandaged with ragged cloth, roared in a desperate attempt to orchestrate a semblance of defense. A few able-bodied men struggled to raise makeshift sharpened sticks, fishing forks, and even scavenged iron swords, endeavoring to prop up the already warped iron fence from below. Yet, it was too late. With a deafening crash and the jarring sound of metal fracturing, the rusted iron barricade, along with a significant portion of the frozen earth and rubble surrounding it, abruptly crumbled inward, creating a breach. From the opening emerged a hulking figure, draped in wet seal skin, with a face grotesque and brutish, eyes glinting with the ferocity of a beast, the captain of the Iron Folk. Gripping a heavy warhammer that carried the frigid breath of the icy sea, he targeted a man struggling to hold the barricade and swung down with brutal force. A chilling scream was abruptly silenced as the man's visage was crushed, crimson and ivory splattering against the ancient, frigid stone walls, a sight so harrowing it could not be ignored. A cruel grin spread across the captain's face as he clawed his way through the breach, his greedy gaze sweeping over the terrified crowd within the tomb, roaring, "Sacrifices for the drowned god. Not a single one shall escape. Slay them all. Plunder them all." Inside the tomb, the desperate defenses collapsed entirely. The shrieks of women, the wails of children, and the agonizing groans of the wounded momentarily drowned out the howling winds and the crackling flames. Terror, like the deepest cold of the icy sea, engulfed everyone present. The hastily constructed line of defense appeared laughably fragile and absurd under this sudden onslaught. Just as despair hung by the thinnest of threads and all believed the end had come, a figure erupted forth from the shadows behind a massive stone sarcophagus, as if released from a tautly drawn slingshot. It was Daisy. She charged forth like an enraged mother bear, yet with the agility of an Arctic wolf, her speed creating a blurred afterimage in the dim light. Her target was not the Iron Captain, who had just committed the act of violence and was half leaning into the breach, but rather the ancient, half-human-high, weathered greenstone tombstone that leaned against the sarcophagus nearby. This gravestone belonged to an ancestor named Bearclaw Anders, its rough-hewn material adorned with simple lines depicting a colossal bear rearing back in a mighty roar, its indomitable spirit still palpable despite the passage of time. Daisy reached the tombstone without hesitation, her waist sinking as her hands, fingers curling like iron hooks, gripped the cold, rough edges of its base. Her slender arm muscles bulged instantaneously, bones creaking ominously under the strain, as if on the verge of yielding. A surge of energy, emanating from the depths of her soul, a tempestuous blend of Li Cunxiao's ferocity and her own boundless rage, roared within her. A sound that bore little resemblance to a human voice, a piercing shriek infused with excruciating agony and a fervent will, erupted from the depths of her throat, causing the dust atop the tomb to tremble and fall in the incredulous, almost dazed gazes of all present. Whether the survivors of Bear Island or the Ironborn about to surge in, that ancient gravestone, which typically required the strength of 5 or 6 robust men to barely shift, was astonishingly lifted from the ground by her sheer might. Her body quaked violently under the strain of such overwhelming power, veins bulging at her temples, beads of sweat instantly saturating her dark hair, clinging to her pale, yet strikingly resolute cheeks. Time seemed to freeze in that moment. The Ironborn captain, who had just slain a man and was reveling in his triumph as he prepared to descend for further carnage, found the cruel grin on his face abruptly frozen. Transformed into utter astonishment and incomprehensible fear, he beheld the black-haired maiden and the colossal shadow she cradled, a shadow akin to a small mountain. It was a manifestation of pure strength, an indomitable will that crushed all in its path. Die! Daisy's voice, hoarse and shattering, resonated with the thunderous weight of a death sentence. Her core unleashed an incredible torque as she embraced the heavy gravestone, no longer merely moving it, but wielding it like a war hammer belonging to a hill giant, cleaving through the oppressive air with a suffocating, mournful wind, aiming it fiercely downward towards the Ironborn captain's head and upper body. The captain barely had time to emit a short, terrified, and bewildered "huh?" instinctively raising his arm in a futile attempt to block the impending blow. But it was in vain. With a thunderous crash that caused every heart to momentarily stop and blood to run cold, the sound erupted within the enclosed tomb. It was not the sound of blades slicing flesh, nor the clang of metal. It was the hard blue stone of the gravestone unleashing its raw, savage force upon the frail human body, producing a bone-chilling crack as bones shattered. It was clear, decisive, imbued with a cruel sense of finality. Under the immense impact, the Ironborn captain's head and upper body were crushed, resembling a watermelon obliterated by a heavy hammer, instantly deforming and collapsing. The spine emitted a series of piercing cracks. Like a sack stripped of all its bones, it slumped down from the gaping wound, landing with a thud upon the cold ground of the tomb, stirring up a cloud of dust and tiny stones. The world seemed to fall silent, leaving only the crackling of burning torches and the uncertain, fearful cries of the Ironborn outside. Within the tomb, everyone appeared petrified, staring blankly at the defiant black-haired maiden, at the ancient gravestone stained with red and white marks at her feet, which seemed to still hum with the remnants of life, and at the blood of her foes that splattered across her face. A chill emanating from the depths of the soul instantaneously quelled the fervor of the Iron Men outside, rousing the numbness of the inhabitants of Bear Island. The old blacksmith, Donald, was the first to react. In that moment, a startling brilliance ignited in his murky eyes, as if he beheld the legendary warriors descending into the mortal realm. He abruptly raised the freshly forged bronze spearhead, still emitting scorching blue smoke, and with every ounce of air from his lungs, unleashed a thunderous roar capable of shattering despair. The breach is in the west. Reinforce the western wall. For heaven's sake, patch up the western wall. This bellowing cry resonated like a searing iron plunged into the stillness of a tranquil pool, inciting a cataclysmic response. It was not a profound military command, but rather a colloquialism that had endured for a century among the inhabitants of Bear Island. Born from the bloodied lessons learned during countless repulsions of the Iron Men and savage raiders, always mending the fragile western wall that was the first to succumb to assault. It had long since seeped into the very marrow of every Bear Islander, symbolizing the resistance, unity, and indomitable spirit in their most perilous moments. At that instant, these simple words transformed into a war drum, coalescing the will and courage of all. Reinforce the western wall. An old fisherman, his leg broken and leaning against the wall, ignited with one last spark of life, seizing a shard of stone from the ground, expending all his strength to hurl it at the Iron Men peering through the breach. Reinforce the western wall. A trembling woman cradling an infant, summoned courage from some unknown source, shrieked as she pressed her frail body firmly against a bronze shield that was rattling from the impact. Reinforce the western wall. The remaining men and women, their eyes aflame with rage, roared as if infused with fervent bravery, wielding whatever they could grasp, broken spears, thick wooden rods, even the hardened bones of their ancestors scattered upon the ground. If they could crush the enemy's skull, they surged madly toward the crumbling breach, which resembled an entrance to hell, sealing the pathway that heralded death with their bodies, shields, gathered stones and earth, teeth and nails. Unwavering, they endeavored to block that conduit of demise. Despair was supplanted by a fierce and tragic will to survive. Hold the line. Stand firm. Donald's roar still echoed. He cast aside his hammer, grasping a recently tempered bronze short spear, its edges still radiating a dull red heat, and charged like a frenzied old bear toward the breach. An Iron Man attempted to lean over, thrusting his spear downward. Donald bellowed in defiance, advancing rather than retreating, fiercely thrusting his short spear upward. With a sickening squelch, accompanied by a piercing scream and the jarring sound of metal scraping against bone, scalding blood rained down from above. The battle for the breach had entered its most brutal and sanguinary phase. Above, the Iron Men frantically smashed, hacked, and jabbed, striving to widen the breach. As more individuals sought to force their way in, below, the survivors of Bear Island, with their flesh and blood, indomitable will, and anything they could find at hand, resolutely sealed the gap and mounted a counterattack. Rocks, broken spears, scalding embers, even the red-hot coals that Donald had unearthed from the furnace, were hurled upwards by men and women. Disregarding all peril, each successful interception was accompanied by a fleeting gasp of relief and the thunderous roar of a more frenzied and synchronized reinforcement of the western wall. This cacophony merged into a relentless tide of defiance, even overpowering the howling winds and the Iron Men's vitriol outside. Daisy stood at the heart of the chaos, breathing heavily. That earth-shattering throw had nearly drained her of strength, and her arms and abdomen throbbed with a piercing ache. Yet, the residual surge of that ferocious power coursed through her limbs, not only failing to deter her, but intensifying her yearning to wield such force to tear out the throats of all invading foes. She bent down to pick up the warhammer that had fallen from the hands of the Iron Men's captain. The handle was cold, smeared with viscous blood and brain matter. With resolute steps, she approached the gaping vent, reminiscent of the gates of hell, moving towards Donald's roaring figure, towards the last bastion known as the Western Wall, constructed of flesh and will. Her presence injected a potent surge of energy into the boiling battlefield. Upon seeing her silhouette, the survivors' eyes ignited with fervor. The biting wind continued to wail mournfully outside the tomb, swirling with ice shards and snowflakes, battering the ancient stone walls. Inside the tomb, The flickering flames illuminated the silent stone coffins of their ancestors, casting light upon the dark crimson pools of blood sprawling across the ground. And reflecting the faces of those who stood at the breach, their features twisted by smoke and blood, hoarsely shouting to reinforce the western wall, alive, struggling. The unyielding backbone of Bear Island. The battle raged from the depths of night until the darkest hour before dawn, when the eastern horizon finally revealed a faint, grim gray. The storm seemed to wane in weariness, and the shouts of battle and the sounds of clashing gradually dwindled, ultimately ceasing. The breach had been completely sealed by bodies, debris, earth, and shattered weapons, allowing only a sliver of dim daylight to seep through the crevices. Outside, the panicked shouts and retreating footsteps of the Iron Men could be heard. Evidently, they had been terrified into retreat by this fierce resistance and inexplicable dread. The pale light of dawn filtered through the gaps, illuminating a scene near the entrance of the tomb that resembled a slaughterhouse. Over 200 corpses of Iron Men lay sprawled haphazardly beneath the vent, both inside and outside the passage, as well as in the snow. Nearly half of them bore the gruesome marks of death, their bones shattered by heavy blows. Within the tomb, survivors supported one another, gazing at the harrowing scene before them, their bodies stained with congealed blood and faces marked by exhaustion. The intertwining emotions of relief for having survived and sorrow for lost loved ones manifested as silent tears and choked breaths. That night, the echoes of the mighty roars from the repaired western wall and the image of the girl wielding her ancestor's gravestone against an army would forever be etched in the depths of each survivor's soul. In the depths of the crypt, the air remained icy and tainted, yet it was no longer solely filled with despair. A new essence permeated the atmosphere, an almost palpable malice born from repressed hatred. The silence that lingered for hours was astonishingly efficient in its preparation. Wounds were cleansed with snowmelt and rewrapped in charred rags, or whatever clean fabric could be found. Armor stripped from the bodies of fallen Ironborn was allocated to those most in need, though most were bloodied and ill-fitting. Still, they provided invaluable protection. Dawn, accompanied by a few young men assisting him, hastily crafted over 30 rudimentary, yet weighty war hammers from the last scraps of metal and sturdy wood found within the tomb. The hammerheads were primarily solid copper blocks or tightly bound stones, specifically designed to breach armor and shatter bones. Fragments of information began to struggle their way in from the outside world. Several fortunate survivors, having escaped into the tomb area or nearby ice caves at different times and from various directions, including an old hunter who, despite dragging a broken leg, persevered for miles, brought with them piecemeal intelligence. The Bear Hall, emblematic of House Mormont, had been seized by approximately 500 elite Ironborn. The sounds of unceasing revelry and raucous laughter emanated from within, as these marauders reveled in their ancestors' hall. The fortress's internal structure was intricate, with narrow passages making it easily defensible once occupied. The main dock was under the direct command of Balon Greyjoy, boasting a formidable force of around 800 men. They had constructed makeshift fortifications, heavily guarded, evidently serving as the Ironborn's linchpin for maintaining a retreat and controlling the coastline. Most infuriating yet slightly hopeful was the news of raiding parties scattered throughout the island's principal settlements, such as Widow's Bay, Frozen Fish Village, Deepwood Mine, and Tundra Pasture, each consisting of 30 to 100 marauders. Many were lost in the thrill of pillaging, either nursing hangovers or laden with stolen goods and captives, preparing to return to the dock, while others continued to wreak havoc in a few stubbornly resistant enclaves. A rough estimate indicated that when Euron's forces landed, their total strength was around 2,000. After a night of fierce conflict, particularly the brutal defense at the tomb entrance, the Ironborn suffered approximately 400 casualties, the majority perishing at the hands of Daisy and the survivors' desperate counterattack, yet still retained a fighting force of 1,600 scattered across the island. The odds were daunting, and the situation remained dire. However, Daisy's extraordinary eruption from the previous night, her ancestral gravestone crashing down upon the Ironborn captain, had ignited a burning legend within the hearts of all survivors, kindling an indelible flame that could not be extinguished. This was not merely a display of strength, but a symbol of the fury that erupted from the depths of despair, a fury that belonged to Bear Island itself. At this moment, surrounding Daisy is a nascent band of warriors forged in blood and fire. At its core are 130 battle-hardened soldiers, their eyes fierce and resolute from the bloodbath of the tomb, joined by lightly wounded comrades and rescued able-bodied men from the nearby icy caverns, bringing their numbers close to 300. Their armaments are a haphazard mix. Some wield captured iron axes and swords, others grip newly forged copper hammers, and some merely clutch wooden sticks bound with sharp flint shards. Yet, within each gaze burns a fervent flame of vengeance and an almost reverent trust directed toward the tall maiden standing beside the stone sarcophagus. Additionally, over 300 women, children, the elderly, and severely injured individuals, including her mother, Lady Maege, are securely sheltered in the deepest recesses of the tomb and in several nearby, more concealed ice caves with water sources, protected by a few who are still able to fight but are gravely wounded. We are not cornered beasts. Daisy's voice, hoarse from blood loss and exhaustion, nevertheless carries a rock-solid conviction, resonating clearly in every ear. She dips her fingers into the still damp, dark red stains on the ground, tracing the rough outline of Bear Island's geography on the cold, smooth stone sarcophagus, resembling a colossal bear lying on its side. The arrows representing the three main forces of the Iron Men are distinctly marked: the elite entrenched in the Bear Hall, the heart of the bear; the main force of Moiraine huddled at the dock, the bear's mouth; and the scattered raiding parties across the island, like the wounds inflicted upon the bear's body. They are spread thin, their forces diluted, arrogant, and complacent. Daisy's fingers press heavily on the bloodstains that denote the raiding parties. This is our only opportunity, our blade of vengeance. Her plan unfolds, as precise and ruthless as the fangs of a northern wolf, with a determination to strike fatally. 1. Clear the pathways. Build strength. Sever the right Fang, utilizing their absolute familiarity with Bear Island's terrain and exploiting the Ironmen's dispersed, arrogant state. Launch highly mobile squads to ambush and eliminate the small raiding parties returning home or lingering in isolated settlements. The objectives are to rescue the captured islanders, recruit the able-bodied, and amass weapons and supplies, while methodically severing the connections between the Iron Men's squads, rendering them blind and deaf in their isolation. 2. Strike the nest. Decapitate the heart. Shatter the left paw after clearing the periphery and strengthening their ranks. Concentrate all elite forces for a sudden assault, with thunderous momentum, to reclaim the Bear Hall. This endeavor is not merely to reclaim a symbol of their homeland and rescue possibly imprisoned loved ones, especially her sisters, but also to significantly boost their morale while delivering a heavy blow to the Ironmen's arrogance, potentially gaining crucial supplies and defensive equipment stored within the fortress. 3. The final surge, burying the enemy in the icy sea, the decisive battle at the dock bolstered by the victory of reclaiming the Bear Hall. Consolidate all forces and launch a direct assault on the dock held by Balon Greyjoy. Achieve victory in one fell swoop, driving these invaders into the sea or burying them along the icy shores. Actions must be swift as the wind and fierce as thunder. Daisy's fingers exuded an undeniable strength as they emphatically pressed upon the blood-stained shard of stone representing the Bear Hall. Now, we shall proceed in separate directions, she commanded. Her gaze first alighted upon the old blacksmith, Donald. You will lead 150 men, 50 of whom are seasoned veterans from the Tomb Blood battle, while the remaining 100 are eager newcomers, fervently yearning for combat. Traverse the elusive paths known only to hunters and the frozen surfaces of the nearshore ice. Your objective lies here. Her bloodied finger traced the map to a narrow chasm situated between Widow's Bay and Frozen Fish Village, Howling Wind Gorge. This is a critical passage for at least 3 raiding parties returning to the docks. The terrain is constricted, flanked by icy cliffs. Set an ambush there. As one would while hunting, devour them. Strike as many as you can, but do not be greedy. Once the task is complete, retreat immediately to the perimeter of Bear Hall and regroup with us. Understood. Rest assured, my lady. Donald's eyes glinted with ferocity, as if he had been rejuvenated by 20 years, his fist striking his rudimentary leather armor with a resounding thud. Hacken. Daisy turned to another figure, Hackenstone Beach, the former captain of the Bear Hall Guard, a man with a resolute visage and eyes as cold as stone. On the day of the Ironman's raid, he had been pursuing a band of poachers along the northern shore, narrowly escaping the initial slaughter. Subsequently, he gathered the remnants of his men on the vast frozen tundra, engaging in a tactical dance with the Iron Men, until he recently reunited with Lady Maege, bringing along a handful of battered soldiers. His experience and loyalty were beyond question. You will take 70 men, selecting the most cunning and familiar with every street and cellar of Frozen Fish Village, including several villagers we have recently rescued. Your target is Frozen Fish Village. Intelligence indicates at least 2 groups of Iron Men are still causing unrest there. Your mission is not to engage in a direct confrontation, but to harass. Utilize fire and thick smoke to create chaos, feign strength to lure them, and delay their return to the docks or Bear Hall. Rescue any hidden villagers if possible. If not, retreat immediately. Preserving our strength is paramount. Understood. Leave it to me. Hakon nodded vigorously, his voice tinged with barely concealed excitement, though his grip on the knife remained as steady as a rock. His eyes ablaze with the desire to reclaim their homeland. The remaining 80 men shall follow me. Daisy's gaze swept over the last group of warriors. Among them were weathered miners, their faces etched with soot and the ravages of time, fishermen with eyes as fierce as sea wolves, and youths, still bearing traces of innocence yet hardened by the perils of the previous night's battle, their gazes now icy. This was a diverse yet equally vengeful assembly bound together by shared hatred. We shall pay a visit to those guests who have occupied our home, delivering to them an unforgettable farewell gift. The flames of battle ignited across the vast and brutal frozen expanse of Bear Island, erupting like wildfires swept up by a tempest. The ambush at Howling Wind Gorge was executed with textbook precision. Utilizing their profound familiarity with the terrain, Donner's team stealthily arranged a plethora of rolling logs, boulders, and concealed archers along the icy cliffs flanking the narrow Howling Gorge, which could barely accommodate 3 or 4 individuals side by side. As 3 squads, laden with provisions, furs, and even pilfered spirits, ambled carelessly into this death trap. Their formation slackened by the biting cold and the fatigue of their recent plunder. An assault descended upon them like a cataclysmic avalanche. The rolling logs and boulders first shattered the front and rear of the formation, severing their avenues of retreat and advance. Immediately following, bone arrows and crude yet sharp bronze projectiles rained down upon them like a tempest from the cliffs. The unsuspecting Iron Men were thrown into disarray, their cries echoing through the narrow gorge, amplified several-fold. The few surviving Iron Men attempted to form a defensive stance on the slick ice, but the gorge's layout thwarted their efforts to organize. At that moment, Donner personally led 50 elite assault troops, emerging from pre-dug lateral ice caverns like heavenly soldiers descending upon the fray, armed with confiscated fine sabers, heavy axes, and even a few steel spears. They plunged into the chaotic ranks of the Iron Men with the ease of slicing through vegetables. The battle unfolded as a one-sided massacre, lasting less than half an hour. Aside from a handful of panicked individuals who leapt into the icy waters, the entire army was annihilated. This engagement not only eradicated nearly 200 foes, but also liberated over 100 captured islanders, seizing a vast cache of weapons, armor, and supplies. Donner's forces swiftly swelled to nearly 300, their spirits soaring, and without pausing to meticulously scour the battlefield, they pressed onward towards the outskirts of Bear Hall, ready to engage in the next confrontation. The assault on Frozen Fish Village resembled a nefarious yet efficient guerrilla campaign. Hakon's team fragmented into smaller units, seamlessly infiltrating the disarrayed Frozen Fish Village, much like droplets merging into the ocean, thanks to their intimate knowledge of the terrain. They ignited the granaries and makeshift stables occupied by the Iron Men, the billowing smoke serving as an optimal signal. They set lethal snares and sharpened stakes along the narrow paths frequented by Iron Men patrols, and using the captured horns, they sounded diverse foe signals of attack, mimicking the communication styles of various groups. 2 squads of Iron Men, initially poised to raid other villages or return to the docks, approximately 100 men, were utterly disoriented by this sudden chaos, exhausting themselves in frantic attempts to regroup, rife with mutual suspicion, and even engaging in minor skirmishes and internal strife due to poor communication and panic. Meanwhile, Hakon's men, like phantoms, exploited their knowledge of the streets and cellars, employing cold arrows and swift strikes to continually harass isolated or small groups of Iron Men, successfully delaying these 2 enemy factions in Frozen Fish Village for at least half a day, while simultaneously rescuing dozens of villagers hidden in cellars or concealed walls. Fortuitously, among the rescued villagers was Lyanna, an infant sister swaddled in blankets, the future Bear Girl, alongside her caretaker, with Hakon's team sustaining remarkably minimal losses. Concurrently, the sweep and infiltration around Bear Hall were personally led by Daisy. She led a silent cohort of 80, traversing the land with an intimate knowledge that allowed them to deftly evade several larger patrols of Iron Folk. Like a surgeon's precise scalpel, they silently dispatched 2 smaller squads of 50 tasked with perimeter vigilance. The skirmish was sudden and brief. Daisy, at the forefront, wielded her dual short swords as if they were the very kiss of death. She commanded no survivors, lest whispers of their actions escape. Along their path, they gathered scattered islanders who had fled and those militia members who remained resolute in their resistance. By the time they arrived, almost specter-like, at the wooded hillside overlooking the familiar stronghold of Bear Hall, Daisy had amassed a formidable force of over 400. Their gear a hodgepodge yet imbued with a palpable thirst for vengeance. The Ironfolk armor and weapons they had seized rejuvenated many, and the fire of retribution burned fiercely in every eye, awaiting its moment of eruption. Once a symbol of the Mormont family's honor and warmth, Bear Hall had now devolved into a foul den of Ironfolk in Daisy's eyes. The once sturdy oak gates were violently breached by a battering ram, now askew and revealing a gaping, dark entrance. In the courtyard, a bonfire blazed, roasting an entire cow or sheep, seized from who knows where. As dozens of Ironfolk encircled the flames, drinking and roaring in a cacophony of raucous revelry, their boisterous songs echoing even in the afternoon's subdued snowfall. Although sentinels still occupied the towers and walls, their figures swayed, leaning against the parapets, evidently intoxicated by the spoils of their plunder. Many windows of the stronghold lay shattered, thick smoke billowing from various points, accompanied by the distant screams of women and the unrestrained laughter of Ironfolk, each sound striking like a venomous thorn in the hearts of every warrior from Bear Island. Daisy lay in the frigid snow, her dark hair merging seamlessly with the shadows of the forest. Her fathomless eyes were locked onto the highest tier of Bear Hall, where her mother, Lady Maege, resided, the very core of her family. Flickering firelight emanated from the windows, casting silhouettes that danced within. Her heart pounded heavily against her ribs, a dull ache reverberating through her chest. Intelligence suggested that her sisters were likely captured during Bear Hall's fall, imprisoned within the upper stronghold. What fate had befallen them? Were they still alive? Were they enduring torment? She dared not contemplate further, her nails digging painfully into her palms, drawing blood. "Miss, a direct assault is unwise," whispered an old soldier, his face marked by a deep scar. He had once been the captain of Bear Hall's guard, possessing an intricate understanding of the fortress's layout. Though the gates had been breached, the passage to the inner keep was as narrow as a throat, and within lay at least 300 half-drunk desperados. They would surely have barricaded the inner keep's doors. From above, a frontal charge would cost lives. Daisy's gaze was as cold as ice, meticulously scanning every detail of the fortress before her. The towering city walls, the soaring turrets, and the battered main fortress gate. Ultimately, her gaze settled upon a low stone archway, exceedingly concealed and nearly obscured by a thick blanket of snow and withered ancient vines. This archway was the entrance to a long-abandoned secret passage. It was a clandestine discovery made during her childhood while playing hide-and-seek with her companions, a winding, narrow corridor. Its exit hidden behind a pile of discarded wine barrels in the ice cellar, a secret likely unknown even to her mother, Lady Maege. "We have a better route." Daisy's voice was low and resolute, a sharp glimmer flashing in her eyes. "Scarface, take 20 of the most agile and fearless, and follow me through the secret passage. The rest will be commanded by the deputy to lie in ambush near the woods by the main gate." Upon hearing the sounds of battle from the inner fortress, seeing flames or chaos, immediately feign an assault at the main entrance to draw attention. The orders were executed silently and swiftly. No one knew how the vengeful bears appeared like phantoms in the heart of the fortress. They seemed to seep from the walls, emerge from the depths of the earth, and quietly materialize from the shadows of the Iron Men's revelry. The battle first erupted in the relatively lax underground storeroom, filled with barrels of wine and plundered goods, and the adjoining lower barracks, quickly spreading like wildfire into the chaotic courtyard. The Iron Men, their nerves dulled by alcohol, fell into disarray at the sudden onslaught. Meanwhile, Daisy was the first to pierce the darkness of this infernal den, a dazzling beacon of ferocity. She burst forth from the secret passage, her target clear, the uppermost level of the fortress. The ferocious combat techniques belonging to Li Cunxiao, swift, precise, and ruthless, were pushed to their utmost limits. The Iron Men who dared to obstruct her path, whether drunken common soldiers or small leaders rushing in to organize a defense, fell before her dual blades, pilfered from the hands of the Iron Men's chieftains, like wheat before a scythe. The glimmer of her sword was akin to a dance of death, each flicker inevitably accompanied by a spray of crimson. Each strike to the throat, heart, neck, or armpit was executed with pinpoint accuracy, devoid of any superfluous motion, embodying the utmost efficiency in slaughter. Trailing behind her was a squad of 20, composed of Scarface and the most formidable miners, forming a lethal vanguard akin to a pack of wolves closely following their lead wolf. They transformed into a highly efficient meat grinder, tearing through the narrow corridors and staircases, shredding the hastily organized resistance of the Iron Men into fragments. The confined space greatly limited the numerical advantage of the Iron Men, amplifying Daisy's personal valor and the fierce synergy of her vanguard tenfold. As she emerged, drenched in blood, like a vengeful deity returned from the infernal depths, She kicked open the heavy oak door of her mother's chamber. The sight that greeted her instantly froze her blood, igniting a tempest of fury within her. Inside the room, 4 iron men, unmistakably of chieftain stature, were gathered around a massive oak table, laughing boisterously and drinking. On the table, her younger sister, 10-year-old Alyssyn, was brutally pressed against the edge by a particularly towering iron-willed leader, his scarred face bearing a menacing countenance. His coarse, filthy hands were tearing at Alysyn's thin undergarment. Tears streaked down her pale cheeks as she struggled and screamed in vain, a trace of blood at the corner of her mouth. In the cold corner of the room, her 8-year-old sister Layla and 6-year-old sister Joelle huddled together like 2 frightened little beasts, trembling with despairing fear in their eyes. Find death. Daisy's roar was laced with a chilling intent to kill and a raging fury that threatened to consume everything. In an instant, her figure moved, swiftly beyond the limits of human perception. The room seemed to erupt in a metallic storm of death. The first Iron Man, lunging towards the corner to seize Layla, was met with Daisy's steel sword, which pierced his neck with uncanny precision, blood spurting from his throat. The second Iron Man barely had time to draw his dagger from his waist before another blade cleaved through his shoulder, almost bisecting him. The third Iron Man reacted slightly quicker, reaching for a short axe resting on the table. Yet, as his fingers brushed the handle, a flash of cold light severed his wrist cleanly. His agonized scream barely escaped his throat before a subsequent sword strike decapitated him. The fourth, the towering leader restraining Alyssyn, was the most reactive. In a panic, he shoved Alyssyn towards Daisy in a desperate attempt to shield himself while grasping the heavy battle axe propped against the table. However, Daisy seemed to have anticipated his every move. As she sidestepped Alyssyn, her right hand wielded the sword in a wicked arc, slicing upward. A sickening sound echoed as the blade cleaved through flesh with terrifying force, driving upward through the Iron Leader's groin, almost eviscerating him. Innards and blood erupted forth in an instant. His eyes bulged wide, filled with disbelief and excruciating pain, his massive form convulsing before crashing down into a pool of blood. Silence enveloped the room, save for Daisy's heavy, suppressed breaths, the muffled sobs of her sisters in the corner, and Alysyn's violent retching from sheer terror and nausea. Sister. Alyssyn gazed at Daisy, whose very presence radiated a terrifying aura of slaughter, her voice trembling uncontrollably, tears streaming down her cheeks. Eyes wide with a profound fear of survival and an ineffable sense of dependency. Daisy did not respond immediately. Instead, she hurried to the corner, tightly embracing the nearly fainting Layla and Joelle, soothing them in the gentlest tone she could muster. Do not fear, sister is here. It is all right. She then set about to cleanse the room, ensuring their safety. Daisy's voice resonated once more, now restored to its icy tone, devoid of any emotion, as if the recent tempest of brutal slaughter bore no connection to her. Scarface, conduct a thorough search of the entire main fortress, liberate all those imprisoned, and gather every usable weapon and piece of armor, especially the wine and oil. We cannot afford to linger here. Her gaze drifted toward the window. Though the dock remained unseen, that direction symbolized the ultimate adversary. Target the dock. In the 9th chapter of the Iron Islands Empress, as Daisy led her vengeful army, swollen to over 1,000 strong, toward the dock beneath the ice-kissing cliff, the afternoon sky hung heavy with leaden clouds. This force embodied the last vestiges of Bear Island's fervor and resilience. Donner's troops, having cleared the howling fjord, hastened to join them, while Hakon's raiding party had successfully extricated themselves from their entanglements. The warriors, though weary and battered, bore the flames of vengeance in their eyes, burning more intensely than ever. The sight before them was enough to make even the staunchest northerner's heart race with fury. Upon the dock's gangway, the menacing golden sea monster flag whipped in the frigid wind. Countless longships lay anchored, like slumbering steel beasts, in the bay scattered with ice fragments, representing both the Ironmen's tyranny and their escape route. On shore, a desolate expanse had transformed into a bloody arena. Nearly 200 Bear Islanders, stripped to the waist and shackled by iron chains, were driven by iron whips to beat one another upon the icy ground. Humiliation, agony, and the primal instinct for survival elicited beastly howls as they struck at former neighbors and kin. Surrounding them were at least 400 to 500 Iron Men, their raucous laughter, howls, and lewd taunts ringing deafeningly in the air as they hurled stones and wine skins into the makeshift arena. Blood stained the pristine snow, and screams echoed as more fell, only to be replaced by fresh captives dragged roughly into the fray. Continuing this cruel game designed to appease the drowned god and trample upon dignity. Further afield, a mountain of plundered supplies, grain, furs, and even stolen trinkets, spoke volumes of the Ironman's avarice. Daisy's gaze, as sharp as a blade, swiftly surveyed the battlefield. 800 Iron Men were stationed at the dock, with no more than 400 remaining elsewhere. Their total strength barely reached 1,002 to 300. In contrast, our mournful army numbered 1,000. Buoyed by the might of reclaiming Bear Hall, their morale soaring and further benefiting from the terrain. The advantage lay with us. This realization steadied her resolve. Balon Greyjoy stood atop the largest longship, the Wrath of the Sea Monster, on its towering deck. Clad in what appeared to be finely crafted half-armor adorned with a lion motif, likely seized from the Westerlands, and draped in a snowy bear cloak originally belonging to a forebear of House Mormont, he stood out conspicuously against the dim backdrop, flaunting his spoils like a jester. In one hand, he clutched a gilded wine skin, while the other rested upon a terrifying double-bladed axe, as large as a door, its edge still stained with dark crimson blood. He looked down from his lofty perch upon the brutal spectacle unfolding on the shore, a cruel and satisfied smile gracing his features as if he were a connoisseur savoring a performance crafted solely for his amusement. It seemed he had already received word of the ambush at Bear Hall and the near decimation of his forces. Yet there was no trace of panic upon his countenance, only a derisive amusement akin to a cat playing with its prey. The silent, dark tide that surged forth from the hillside appeared to him as merely another picturesque scene enhancing his entertainment. An elderly fisherman, battered and bloodied, nearly unable to stand, was dragged into the arena by two Iron Men, their faces twisted in malevolent glee. A particularly hulking figure, the leader of the Iron Men, adorned with a tattoo of an octopus, approached with raucous laughter, raising a hefty axe, poised to cleave the old man in twain for the amusement of the crowd. The cries of the Iron Men reached a fever pitch, their bloodlust saturating the air. At that moment, a steel arrow, its fletching adorned with raven feathers, sliced through the air with a piercing shriek reminiscent of Death's own summons, striking with unerring precision through the leader's thick wrist, which held the raised axe. The sheer force of the impact sent both the severed hand and the axe flying away. A horrific scream erupted, echoing like a sea monster's death throes, instantly drowning out the cacophony of laughter and shouts. All mirth and vitriol ceased abruptly, and the gazes of the Iron Men, as well as those aboard the ships, turned in astonishment, fury, and a barely perceptible chill towards the direction from which the arrow had come, toward the slope adorned with black rocks that jutted from the ice-kissed cliffs. There, amidst the snow and wind, Daenerys Mormont slowly lowered the resilient longbow that belonged to one of the Iron Men's leaders. She stood at the forefront of her ranks, like a black rock steadfast against the surging tide, her form towering and resolute. Her thick, dark hair danced wildly in the frigid gusts, her deep-set eyes fixed with unwavering intensity upon the figure draped in a snow-white bear pelt, a stain upon the glory of her ancestors. Her visage bore the remnants of both dried and fresh blood, adding an air of grim authority that transcended her years, emanating from a profound strength rooted deep within her soul. Behind her, 1,000 Avengers from Bear Island silently raised their bloodied weapons, iron axes, heavy picks, sharp fish forks, iron-studded shields, along with long swords, war hammers, maces, and spears salvaged from Bear Hall's armory. They stood as silent as mountains, their bodies marred by scars, yet collectively, their thirst for vengeance surged like a palpable tide, silently, yet powerfully crashing against the shore, rendering the very air around them thick with tension. The smug amusement and mockery that had once adorned the countenance of Balon Greyjoy vanished in an instant, replaced by a furious indignation at having been so grievously affronted. He discerned the makeshift banner of the bloodied Mormont bear, reclaimed from Bear Hall, tied to a spear on the hillside, and locked eyes with the black-haired girl at the forefront, her gaze sharp as a poisoned blade. He recognized her, the eldest Mormont, who had cost him his lieutenant, Darro, and his men at Ice Bay, rumored to have crushed hundreds of foes in the tombs like a beast. The combined weight of shame and rage shattered his reason in an instant. In the 10th chapter of The Sovereign of Bear Island, titled The Final Battle at the Dock, 2, he forcefully smashed the gilded wine pouch onto the deck beneath his feet, causing the expensive liquid to splatter everywhere. Grasping a massive, fearsome battle axe, its blade slicing through the air with a piercing sound, he pointed it directly at Daisy on the hillside. With all his might, he unleashed a roar that reverberated across the bay, filled with utter disdain, provoked fury, and a raw, bloodthirsty desire. Daisy Mormont, you wretched bear cub who narrowly escaped death. How dare you disturb the triumphant feast of the son of the drowned god, alongside your band of beggarly wretches risen from the grave? I shall dismantle your bones to fashion my ship's nails. I will strip the scalps from your sisters to adorn my vessel's sides. Let the blood of the Mormont women fill my cup. Come forth. Let me see how long you, little she-bear, can withstand the axe of Maurin, the shipbreaker. Long live the drowned god. His roar was akin to a battle horn. The iron men on the shore, roused to action, let out wild, bloodthirsty war cries. Seizing their weapons like a frenzy of sharks sensing blood, charging fiercely toward the seemingly outnumbered black-clad ranks on the hillside. Hacken. Daisy's voice pierced through the cold wind. Clear and unyielding, devoid of any tremor. Step forward. Hacken advanced on the stony beach, his longbow taut in hand, flanked by approximately 150 archers, mostly the youngest fishermen and hunters of the island, many still bearing the innocence of youth upon their faces. Yet their gazes had been tempered by days of blood and fire, as resolute as hardened steel. They wore no heavy armor, only thick fur coats, resembling the swift and lethal wolves of the snowy plains. The arrows are the fangs of death. Let them drink their fill of blood before they are spent. Once spent, your blade shall be the pride of the north. Understand, no retreat until the arrows are exhausted. Hacken growled in response, and the young archers tightened their grips on their bows, determination etched in their eyes. Donner. Daisy's gaze shifted to the steadfast old blacksmith. Milady. Donner Ain stepped forward. Behind him a dense formation of nearly 800 spearmen and polearm soldiers. Their gear was a hodgepodge, yet it bore the mark of resolute determination. Their leather armor was studded with iron and copper pieces, and some had even strapped heavy wooden cutting boards or thick oak planks to their chests and backs as makeshift armor. The front line of soldiers bore handcrafted, crude wooden shields on their left arms, or thick round wooden discs and large bowls strapped to their chests, forming a mobile wooden barrier. Firmly grasping their spears, harpoons, and sharpened wooden poles, their gazes were as unwavering as the rocks buried deep in frozen earth. They were the dam against the surging tide. Do you see that shallow gully at the foot of the slope? Daisy pointed to a natural trench partially obscured by snow, the juncture of steepness on the hillside, marking your final line of defense. Not a step back. With your spears, forge an iron forest. With your lives, seal the throat of the sea monster. One falls, another rises to take their place. Without my command, even in death, face the enemy and use our bodies as shields against them. Not a single step back. Long live Bear Island. 800 throats erupted in a thunderous growl, their long-handled weapons striking the ground in unison, producing a heart-stirring roar amidst the flying snowflakes. Daisy cast her final gaze upon the 100 most elite warriors at her side. They were clad in the finest armor procured from the Iron Clan leaders and the arsenal of the Bear Hall, iron-plated gear, chainmail, and even fragments of plate armor. Wielding heavy battle axes, great swords, fearsome spiked clubs, and sharp, curved blades. They had once been the sharp knives that shattered the iron locks of Bear Hall, and now they would become the fiercest tide of vengeance, the decisive force in today's battle. Daisy herself bore 2 finely crafted short warhammers. Discovered deep within the Bear Hall's arsenal, their heads cruelly spiked, their short handles wrapped in non-slip leather, glinting with a cold, hard sheen. Follow me, Daisy's voice, though not loud, radiated an uncanny penetrating power and undeniable conviction, reaching the ears of every fervent warrior, piercing through their backs, tearing at their hearts. Rescue our kin. Transform Marlin's feast into a funeral dirge for him and his marauders. A roar. Follow the lady. Annihilate the iron mongrels. The response from the 100 warriors was akin to the howls of ravenous wolves on the frozen tundra, their battle fervor ignited. The silent command had already been conveyed. Amidst the chaos and snow before the clash of battle erupted, 50 of the most agile and adept fishermen, like phantoms merging with shadows, bore sealed fish oil barrels and casks of strong liquor, with short blades clenched in their mouths, silently slipped into the bone-chilling waters, swimming towards the fleet of longships anchored near the shore. They were water ghosts, the deadly fuses that would ignite the fires of hell and sever the enemy's retreat. Just as the grim silence was on the verge of being shattered, Daisy's voice rang out once more, imbued with a strange resonance that clearly reached every warrior's ear, delivering the final pre-battle reminder. Spear bearers, remember, your waist is the axis, your legs take root. Unite your shoulders and arms to thrust. She executed a simplistic motion, her body taut like a drawn bow, her arms extending like arrows, thrusting fiercely forward. There were no flourishes, only a concentrated explosion of energy focused at a single point. Jumping squat. Strike. Like an avalanche. Like ice cracking. Forge ahead. She held her hands as if gripping an invisible giant axe, bringing it down with fierce determination. The motion was grand and decisive, embodying the resolve to cleave through all obstacles and annihilate everything in their path. Water Ghost Brethren. Focus, calm your spirit. Let the cold tide wash over you. Ignite the fire within your hearts. A brief incantation, a thought of inner focus. This was the only method she could conceive after merging her memories, a way to aid these brave fishermen in maintaining their momentum amidst the icy seas. In that instant, as her words fell, the horn of the Iron Clansman sounded a chilling charge from the shore. Long live the drowned god. For King Balon. Exterminate them. The scarlet tide, accompanied by bloodthirsty roars and the glint of weaponry, surged forth like a furious sea breaching its dam, crashing violently against the seemingly fragile hillside defenses. Release. Hakon's piercing cry echoed like an eagle's scream, shattering the heavens. The bows twanged in unison, a furious chorus. The initial wave of dense arrows descended like an enraged swarm of bees, shrieking the harbinger of death as they cascaded down the slope. They traced a lethal arc, soaring over the heads of frontline comrades, and plunged mercilessly into the advancing tide of iron men. The muffled thuds of blades piercing flesh resounded in a grim symphony. The foremost iron men collided with an invisible wall of sharp spikes, collapsing in anguished cries. Some were shot through the throat, gasping as they fell. Others were pierced in the thigh, rolling in despair, while many were simultaneously struck by multiple arrows, pinned like hedgehogs to the snowy ground. The once ferocious charge faltered. Scatter freely. Aim for the leaders and the gaps in their shields. Hurry. Faster. Hakon's voice resonated with a fierce determination. The bow in his hand scarcely rested. Each arrow released in a meteoric flight, precisely targeting those iron men attempting to organize a shield wall and issue commands. The youths behind him, gritting their teeth, their lips turning purple from the cold, fingers marked by the bowstring's embrace, resolutely unleashed arrow after arrow from their quivers towards the foe. The relentless rain of arrows poured down. Though it could not entirely halt the enemy's tidal advance, it effectively impeded their pace and disrupted their formation, granting the spear formation below the slope the most precious time to solidify their stance. Stand firm. Hold the line. Donal Ain's thunderous roar reverberated from the base of the slope. 800 long spears, forks, and sharpened poles shot forth like venomous serpents, densely clustered, glinting ominously, forming a despairing thicket of steel thorns. The first row of soldiers leaned forward, their shoulders braced firmly against their shields or wooden armor, their feet seemingly rooted in the frozen earth at the edge of the shallow trench. The second, third, and fourth rows followed suit, the long poles stacked in layers, the spear tips of the rear soldiers even reaching above the shoulders of their front row comrades, the entire formation resembling a spiked iron hedgehog. Boom! The frenzied tide of iron men finally crashed against this seemingly frail yet unyielding defense. At the moment of impact, the sounds of shattering bones, the dull explosions of splintering wooden shields, the sickening sounds of steel-piercing flesh, the dying wails, and the frenzied roars intertwined, composing the most brutal and primal symphony of war. Hold firm. For Bear Island. Thrust. The spear-bearers mechanically repeated the singular yet most effective motion taught by Daisy. Thrust. Channeling their strength through their waists and legs, their shoulders and arms united, they concentrated all their might at the spear tip, leveraging the terrain to drive downwards with ferocity. The frontline iron men were often pierced by multiple spears simultaneously, flailing helplessly like fish skewered on a fork, creating obstacles for their comrades behind. Those in the rear trampled over the bodies of their fallen companions in the slick blood, wildly swinging their battle axes and curved blades. With splintered, iron shards shattered, the front line of warriors continuously collapsed, their wooden shields shattered and crude defenses cleaved apart, blood staining the snow beneath their feet. Yet as they fell, their bodies remained steadfastly propped against the edge of the shallow ditch, embodying the vow of never retreating with their very lives. The second line of warriors immediately roared in to take their place, the frozen ground beneath them already saturated and melted by the searing blood, quickly refreezing into dark red ice. The defensive line trembled violently under immense pressure, like a taut bowstring, bending and quaking, with parts even breached by valiant iron men. Nevertheless, through the desperate efforts of their comrades at the rear, the line was continually restored, never completely severed. The shallow ditch swiftly filled with the bodies of the iron men and the fallen from both sides, forming a horrific dam of flesh and ice. The sound of breaking spears echoed incessantly as warriors, without hesitation, drew their short axes and daggers from their waists or picked up stones from the ground, fighting fiercely with fists, heads, and teeth against the onslaught of the iron men. A fisherman from Bear Island, with an arm severed, clung desperately to the leg of an iron man with his remaining hand, biting fiercely into the calf until he was hacked to death without releasing his grip. A blood-soaked youth, his wooden staff splintered into 2 pieces, wielded a half-section embedded with bloodied iron nails, howling as he toppled an enemy several times his size, driving the nails into the opponent's eye socket. The brutality of the battle exceeded all imagination, every inch of ground soaked in blood. On the hillside, Hakon's forces had exhausted their arrows, fatigue etched across their faces, yet more prominently was the wild madness and vengeful delight. With eyes ablaze, they unsheathed their short knives and daggers, even picking up blood-stained stones from the ground, like an enraged pack of wolves. At Hakon's roar of "Follow me" into the fray, they charged down the slope, howling as they flanked the bloody front line. Though youthful and lacking in close combat experience, their burning desire for revenge and fearless courage compensated for their shortcomings. They darted through the chaos of the battlefield with agile bodies, stabbing their short blades into the ribs and thighs of their foes, hurling stones at the back of enemies' heads, significantly disrupting the rhythm of the Iron Men's assault and alleviating the pressure on the front line of spears. Meanwhile, as the front line was embroiled in a brutal melee, Daisy led a 100-strong skirmishing unit, like blades of shadow, stealthily navigating the jagged rocks of the frost-kissed cliffs. Utilizing the terrain and the cacophony of battle as cover, they precariously circumvented the main battlefield's front, striking with lethal precision at the rear flank of the docks arena. The scene within the arena was even more appalling than it appeared from a distance. Dozens of iron men remaining there wielded cleavers and whips, frantically slaughtering the unarmed captives shackled by iron chains, eager to complete their massacre before the main force could return or to incite their comrades' morale with the bloodshed. The cries of anguish, pleas for mercy, and the maniacal laughter of the iron men intermingled, creating a hellish cacophony. Kill. Leave no one alive. Daisy's roar echoed like thunder, instantly drowning out the clamor of the arena. With unwavering resolve, she charged forth, wielding her dual hammers, resembling a vortex of death as she plunged into the enemy ranks. She possessed an innate understanding of the essence of a downward strike, her strength emanating from her waist and legs, coursing through her spine and infusing her arms, culminating in a thunderous explosion at the hammer's head. There were no intricate maneuvers, only the simplest, most direct, and most violent downward strikes and sweeping blows. With one hammer blow, the helmet of an ironclad foe, raised to deliver a fatal blow, shattered like a watermelon along with its skull. Twirling around, she delivered another sweeping strike, and another charging Iron Man found his heavy chainmail caved in, the sound of shattering bones resonating clearly, as his body was sent flying like a ragged sack. In her wake, a tempest of blood and carnage ensued, leaving behind a myriad of contorted and mangled corpses. Not a single adversary standing. The sheer brutality she unleashed instilled absolute terror. Behind her, 100 frenzied death warriors surged forth like tigers among sheep, their pent-up hatred finally unleashed. Heavy battle axes cleaved through flesh and bone, great swords severed limbs, maces smashed bodies, and curved blades slit throats. These well-equipped, fearless elite fighters, akin to a hot knife through butter, swiftly turned the tide against the Iron Men, who were preoccupied with slaughtering captives, causing chaos and disarray. Break the chains. Arm yourselves. We are the people of Bear Island, not lambs destined for slaughter. Daisy yelled, swinging her hammer to send an Iron Man and his weapon flying, her voice imbued with a rallying strength. The surviving captives awoke from their hellish despair, their instinct for survival and suppressed humiliation igniting a fierce rage. They seized the weapons discarded by the Iron Men, even grabbing scattered wooden sticks, iron chains, and ropes from the docks, howling as they charged at the remnants of the butchers. The flames of vengeance blazed fiercely in their eyes, transforming the once helpless lambs into vengeful wolves. Those who can swim, join the water ghosts in the assault. Burn the bastards' retreat. Those who cannot swim, grab your weapons and follow me back. Let us wrap those bastards in dumplings. Daisy's voice, commanding and powerful, instantly ignited the fighting spirit of all those she had saved. Her clear commands swiftly restored order to the chaotic scene. Dozens of captives with swimming prowess rushed toward the shore, joining forces with the water ghosts who had just emerged from the frigid waters and were igniting fish oil cans with flint. The fire of revenge momentarily dulled their awareness of cold and fear. The remaining 100 captives, now filled with bloodlust, seized a variety of weapons, spontaneously merging into Daisy's frenzied battalion, launching a desperate countercharge against the unguarded backs of the Iron Men on the front lines. This newfound strength, though equipped haphazardly, possessed a fervent resolve that could shake the battlefield. Meanwhile, on the front lines, a subtle yet lethal shift occurred as the frenzied battalion and the Water Ghost team moved into action. Burn the ships. Incinerate those sea monster eggs, roared Old Olsen, the captain of the Water Ghosts, his face weathered by salt and age. They hurled the ignited fish oil cans and barrels of strong liquor towards the nearest longships, targeting their holds, decks, and rigging. The sealed oils and spirits met the flames, erupting in a thunderous blaze. Glowing tongues of orange fire voraciously licked at the oak hulls and the fish oil-soaked ropes and sails. Thick smoke billowed, and flames soared into the heavens. Several longships were instantly transformed into colossal torches floating upon the bay, casting a crimson glow upon the dreary sky and sea. Our ship is ablaze. The retreat is cut off. The Iron Men, gripped by terror, turned to witness the towering inferno and dense smoke behind them. It was their lifeline, their means of survival. The very psychological pillar of the warriors from the Iron Isles. Panic surged through them like frigid seawater, extinguishing their fervor in an instant, saturating every heart with dread. The momentum of their assault faltered, formations disintegrated, and some began to glance back instinctively, even retreating. In this moment of deadly hesitation, a thunderous battle cry erupted from the rear flank of the Iron Men. Kill! For Mormont! For Bear Island! The deafening roar of battle echoed like thunder across the battlefield. Daisy Mormont, drenched in blood, emerged like a Valkyrie returning from the infernal depths, wielding her bloodied twin hammers, leading the frenzied dead and liberated captives. Piercing through the Iron Men's ranks like a searing blade. The appearance of this fresh force took the Iron Men completely by surprise. Wherever Daisy advanced, foes fell before her. She carved a bloody path through the enemy throng, which was already wavering in morale. The warriors behind her followed closely, ruthlessly slaughtering the Iron Men. Now engulfed in chaos and fear, the dread of being attacked from all sides spread rapidly through the ranks of the Iron Men. Simultaneously, the front line, enduring immense pressure and suffering heavy casualties, yet standing resolute like a rocky outcrop, sensed the weakening of the enemy's assault and the turmoil behind them, erupting with their final and wildest strength. Bear Island, fight to the death, advance. The roar of the Donner warriors resounded across the battlefield like a dying bear. The surviving spearmen, treading upon the corpses of comrades and foes alike, their eyes glinting with a feral light, began a slow yet determined counterattack against the Iron Men's onslaught. Each step was soaked in blood, each spear driven by endless hatred. Surrounded, the retreat rout ablaze. Morale shattered. The Iron Men's seemingly indomitable spirit, under these three devastating blows, shattered like glass struck by a mighty hammer, collapsing utterly. Flee! We are surrounded. The gods have abandoned us. Surrender! We surrender. Spare us! Despairing cries and pleas replaced the wild battle shouts. Groups of Iron Men cast down their weapons, kneeling upon the cold, blood-soaked snow, hands clutching their heads, trembling. Stripped of their earlier bravado, only a handful of the fiercest loyalists continued to resist in vain, but they were soon overwhelmed in the tide of vengeance from the warriors of Bear Island, reduced to mere pulp. In the 13th chapter of The Queen of Bear Island, a pivotal clash unfolds at the docks. Upon the ship's deck, Maege Greyjoy witnesses the swift turn of events, his eyes nearly bursting with disbelief. The meticulously orchestrated feast he had envisioned, a game of cat and mouse, has transformed into a graveyard for his beleaguered army. The proud warriors of the Iron Islands, whom he regarded as invincible, are now brought to their knees, pleading for mercy at the hands of Northmen farmers and fishermen, whom he deemed mere lambs and beggars. A profound sense of humiliation and fury ignites within him like a venomous fire, obliterating the remnants of his sanity. Daisy, the harlot of Mormont, he bellows, a beastly roar echoing from his throat, the weight of disgrace nearly driving him to madness. Grasping the formidable battle axe, akin to a door panel, he shoves aside the guards attempting to dissuade him and plunges down from the ship's deck, fixated on the figure of the girl amidst the chaos. A tempest of darkness wreaking havoc and dismantling all he holds dear. He yearns to shred her apart, to cleanse his disgrace with her blood. Daisy, having just crushed the skull of a defiant Iron Man, wields a fine steel sword that cleaves through an enemy charging from the side. Suddenly, an ominous, chilling sensation akin to being targeted by a monstrous creature from the depths of the icy sea pierces her back. It is the unmistakable intent to kill, honed through countless battles. She pivots sharply, retreating just in time. The axe, resembling a massive door, slices through the air with a deafening shriek, grazing her nose before crashing down with tremendous force into the frozen earth where she had just stood, sending a spray of snow and debris flying. The sheer might of the blow reverberates through the ground, a testament to its terrifying power. Maege Greyjoy, draped in a stolen snow-white bear pelt, now soiled with mud and blood, presents a grotesque and pitiful sight. His face contorts with rage, eyes ablaze with madness and vengeance, fixating on Daisy as if he intends to consume her whole. "Little bear, I shall reduce you to a mere pulp. Your skull shall be a tribute to Lord Balon." He roars, muscles taut as he struggles to extract the axe embedded in the frozen ground. His overconfidence in his strength leads him to believe that once close enough, a single swing will neutralize this troublesome girl. The moment is ripe. His strength waning, an opening appears. Daisy's gaze sharpens with a cold glint. Her instincts for battle seize this fleeting opportunity. Without hesitation, she channels the power of her legs and waist, coiling like a spring primed to unleash its force. Her body surges forward like an arrow released from a bow, one step taken with purpose. Arm raised high, she hoists the hammer overhead, its head slicing through the air with resolute determination. Die! The hammer descends like a falling star, aimed directly at the exposed side of Maureen's head, which leans slightly forward as he exerts force to free his axe, leaving him vulnerable. Yet, Maureen, seasoned in the art of combat, senses the imminent threat at the last possible moment. He abandons his attempt to withdraw the axe, instinctively raising his left arm to block, while desperately tilting his head to the right. Crack! A crisp, jarring sound reminiscent of a bone fracturing pierced through the cacophony of the battlefield. A resounding scream erupted from Marlon, a harrowing wail that echoed across the chaos. Fortunately for him, his head had narrowly escaped the fatal blow. However, his robust left arm, which had attempted to shield him, was mercilessly shattered at the elbow by the formidable steel warhammer, imbued with the essence of martial prowess. The severed limb twisted grotesquely, white bone protruding through torn flesh, as blood gushed forth like a fountain. The excruciating pain, coupled with an overwhelming sense of dread, engulfed the once mighty shipbreaker. All his arrogance, confidence, and strength seemed to vanish alongside his severed arm. He resembled a cornered beast, stripped of its claws and paralyzed by fear. With only the primal instinct for survival flickering in his eyes, he could hardly attend to the colossal axe he cherished as life itself. Instead, he desperately clutched the gaping wound of his severed arm with his remaining hand. Amidst the valiant efforts of his loyal guards, who bravely charged to shield him from Daisy, he stumbled and crawled toward the edge of the burning pier, a soul lost in despair. "Stop her! Stop that sorceress!" he cried, blood spraying in a vivid arc as he leapt into the icy, tumultuous bay, littered with floating ice and charred wood, like a wretched dog bereft of its home. The ocean mercilessly swallowed his final, anguished cries, mingled with pain and terror. With Marlon's desperate plunge into the sea, his fate uncertain, yet defeat inevitable, the last vestige of resistance from the Ironborn dissipated completely. The surviving 400 Ironborn, akin to dogs stripped of their spine, crumpled to the ground, helplessly raising their hands in surrender amidst the bloodied weapons of the Bear Island warriors. In the bay, following Daisy's specific orders and the shifting tides of battle, several large longships, including the flagship Wrath of the Sea Monster, were successfully captured due to the relentless assault from the water wraiths and captives, compounded by Marlon's hasty retreat. The majority of the remaining longships, however, succumbed to the flames, sinking slowly or being entirely consumed, extinguishing any remaining hopes of the Ironborn. The so-called raging tide of the Iron Isles, which had invaded Bear Island during the rebellion, ultimately shattered against this blood-soaked, fire-scorched frozen ground, becoming mere dust in the annals of history. Exhausted, the Bear Island warriors supported one another as they gazed upon the kneeling captives and the blazing bay, a tapestry of relief at surviving, the thrill of vengeance, and the sorrow of lost kin intertwining into a thunderous cheer, interspersed with stifled sobs. She recognized that this victory was merely the beginning. The era of Daisy, or rather, Daisy Mormont, was inexorably rising, heralded by this magnificent yet brutal triumph. Chapter 14. Post-battle preparations of the Iron Islands. Daisy's voice was hoarse and dry, akin to being worn by gravel, yet it possessed an undeniable clarity that resonated amidst the slightly chaotic dock. The fatigue of battle was etched upon every countenance, but her mere presence was akin to a steadfast anchor. Miss Hacken of the Stone Beach immediately stepped forward, bowing in acknowledgement. His leather armor bore numerous scars, yet he stood tall and straight, his voice weary yet imbued with the distinctive briskness and obedience of a soldier. Daisy's gaze swept over the disarray of the dock, the half-sunken or smoldering longboats, and the grim tableau of captives kneeling in the shadows. Her commands were as incisive as a blade, devoid of any ambiguity. The dock, the sunken ships, the captives, and the sentry duties are entrusted to you. Ensure the captives are segregated and closely guarded, separating the surrendered from their leaders. And maintain utmost vigilance. Any signs of unrest must be met with lethal force. Whatever valuables can be salvaged from the sunken vessels, be it money, crossbows, catapult components, intact planks, iron nails, or canvas ropes, retrieve them to bolster our armaments. Anything deemed useless must be utterly destroyed to prevent aiding the enemy. As for the dockworks, she gestured towards the hastily constructed yet battle-worn low walls and barricades erected by the Iron Folk. They must be repaired and oriented towards the sea for fortification. Erect sturdy wooden fences relying on the coastal rocks. Position the salvaged crossbows upon the ice-kissing cliff and the highest rocky outcrops over there. Lookouts and signal beacons. Her gaze fixed upon the summit of the ice-kissing cliff and the nearby jagged black rocks, must be established without delay. Let the smoke rise. I want it visible from across the island. We cannot allow the enemy to stealthily approach our shores again. Hakon's eyes gleamed with determination, his heart stirred. For millennia, the lords of Bear Island had relied on personal valor and the fierce courage of their family warriors, often responding to raids with hasty battles or fortified defenses. Never had a lord like Miss Daisy approached the aftermath of such a great conflict with such systematic calmness in organizing the coastal defense. What foresight! He bowed deeply, his voice resolute. Yes, rest assured, miss. The stone beach will remain unyielding, and the dock will not lose an inch. The lookout signal will be operational within 3 days. Allison Daisy turned to her busy sister. 10-year-old Alyson Mormont knelt on the ground, carefully cutting the blood-soaked leather coat of a young warrior who had been struck in the abdomen by an arrow. Due to her tender age, she had not participated directly in the battle, yet she had taken it upon herself to manage the logistical rescue efforts. The recent turmoil and bloodshed had stripped much of her youthful innocence, and although her movements appeared somewhat awkward, they were remarkably swift and focused. Raising her head at the sound, her eyes, though bloodshot, sparkled with brightness and resolve. Devoid of any trace of fear, gather all able-bodied individuals to prioritize assisting Captain Hakon with the spoils. Inventory all supplies, weapons and armor, food and grains, fabrics and medicines, categorizing and documenting them meticulously. Organize the uninjured women to care for the wounded, tending to their cleaning, bandaging, and preparing warm meals and broths. Moreover, her gaze swept over the orphans and widows huddled against the biting wind, those who had lost husbands or fathers. Her voice softened somewhat, yet retained an unwavering strength as she directed that all usable warm furs and blankets from the storeroom be distributed first to the wounded and the elderly and children in dire need of warmth. We are our own, she urged. Let us endure. All right, I understand. Alyson nodded vigorously, her words succinct, and immediately rose to summon the nearby women and older children, her youthful voice striving to sound steady as she issued clear instructions. Finally, Daisy turned her attention to the combatants, sitting or lying as they tended to their wounds and nibbled on cold rations. She raised her voice, resonating across the weary dock, still infused with a fervent energy. All combatants, remove your armor, dress your wounds, eat well, then sleep. Her sharp gaze swept over several wounded individuals still attempting to assist in transporting the spoils. This is a military order. Your lives are the sharpest spear and the strongest shield of Bear Island. Heal your injuries and restore your strength. The future of Bear Island requires your survival, not your demise in the wake of victory. With the command issued, like finely tuned gears engaging, the dock swiftly transformed from chaotic celebration to organized diligence. Hakon immediately rallied the uninjured or lightly wounded warriors, along with the townsfolk who had rushed from various parts of the island, moving like a highly efficient swarm of ants. Sturdy ropes were cast towards the half-sunken wrecks, while grappling hooks dragged heavy crossbows and ironclad rams. Logs were hoisted by the collective effort to the shattered fortifications. The sound of hammers striking nails ringing out as they bound and reinforced with captured ship ropes. Nimble youths scaled the steep cliffs, clearing snow and stacking firewood and damp grass for signal fires. Alyson buzzed tirelessly like a diligent bee, flitting between the groaning wounded, the towering piles of supplies, and the makeshift porridge stalls emitting steam. Her youthful yet methodical commands became a vital source of stability. Chapter 15. Thoughts arranged only after ensuring all matters were in order did Daisy feel a wave of dizziness crash over her legs wavering beneath her, nearly causing her to falter. 3 consecutive days of relentless bloodshed, the unyielding tension of her mind. and the physical strain induced by forcibly activating Li Cunxiao's legacy had depleted every ounce of potential within her 11-year-old body. She yearned to collapse to the ground and sink into an abyss of sleep. Summoning the last vestiges of her willpower, she trudged step by step along the path home, each footfall akin to treading on cotton, yet burdened as if dragging an immense weight. The main fortress of Bear Hall, ravaged by the Iron Men, appeared particularly dilapidated and cold. Daisy paid no heed to the shattered furniture or overturned braziers within the hall, nor did she possess the strength to address the filth that required cleaning. She strode across the vacant and disordered hall, ascending the frigid stone steps towards her chamber nestled at the pinnacle of the tower. Upon pushing the door open, a familiar, faint scent of pine mingled with the mustiness of long-abandoned quarters enveloped her. In stark contrast to the chaos below, this space appeared to be the last untouched sanctuary on Bear Island, preserving a flicker of tranquility. She secured the door latch with a swift motion, scarcely pausing to shed the blood-soaked leather armor that had become rigid and reeked of sweat and rust, only managing to set aside the heavy steel war hammers that hung from her waist. Thud, thud. The hammerheads struck the wooden floor with a dull resonance. She stumbled forward, nearly collapsing onto the cold, unyielding wooden bed. The instant her body met the mattress, her taut nerves snapped like a bowstring, and her consciousness was instantly engulfed by an abyss of darkness and fatigue, sinking into the deepest slumber. There were no bizarre dreams, nor fragments of past lives intertwining. Only an unfathomable peace and restoration akin to returning to the womb. The clamorous din from outside, the bustling docks, the occasional groans of wounded soldiers, and the ceaseless wail of the sea breeze, all sounds faded away, isolated from her weary body. Only her labored, prolonged breaths reverberated rhythmically in the silence of the cold room. An entire day and night passed. When Daisy finally opened her eyes again, twilight had enveloped the world outside. Every inch of her bones and muscles ached as if they had been disassembled, yet the suffocating exhaustion and the soul-wrenching disarray had finally subsided. Her chaotic thoughts settled like drifting sand, becoming remarkably clear and lucid. It was time, indeed necessary, to meticulously assess her thoughts. She lay in bed, not rising immediately, her gaze fixed upon the familiar wood grain of the ceiling. In her previous life, as a devotee of fantasy and military history, she was well acquainted with the tales of A Song of Ice and Fire in the series Game of Thrones. The Mormont family, in her, or rather, her former self's, memory, epitomized unwavering loyalty, while she herself, the Daisy Mormont depicted in the original text or series, was destined to be brutally eviscerated at the bloody wedding to come. According to the series, even her younger sister Lyanna, still an infant at this time, would ultimately meet a valiant end, leading to the complete annihilation of their family, spilling the last drop of blood for the Starks. Such a tragic fate evokes deep sorrow. Daisy exhaled gently, her breath forming a white mist that dissipated in the frigid air. However, now that she had arrived, with her soul belonging to the otherworldly Daisy, and possessing the unparalleled martial legacy of Li Cunxiao, the trajectory of her destiny must be rewritten. She not only aims to ensure Daisy Mormont's survival, but also aspires to empower the Mormont family in Bear Island, making them thrive splendidly and robustly in this harsh world, projecting their own indomitable voice that cannot be overlooked. From this moment forth, she shall be known by the name Daisy, for she has wholly embraced and identified with this identity. Her thoughts drifted toward a broader scenario. Balon Greyjoy, she murmured softly, her brow furrowed. A man who dared to declare himself the king of the Iron Islands while King Robert had already occupied the Iron Throne for 6 years, during a relatively stable period in the Seven Kingdoms. Was he merely a fool? To attribute his actions solely to a lack of intellect seems overly simplistic. Can one truly ascend to power or even claim kingship while being devoid of political acumen and strategic foresight? Recalling the events she knew, she found it hard to believe that he acted without backing, without possessing more precise intelligence or exploiting subtle rifts among the Seven Kingdoms. Although in the novels and series, Balon appears as a stubborn brute, this world possesses its own intrinsic logic. So, what lies at the heart of Balon's rebellion? What leads him to believe he can succeed? Daisy's mind raced, piecing together fragmented information gleaned from interrogating captives along with her own analysis. Balon's choice to act at this moment must be underpinned by some form of assurance or perhaps an exceedingly audacious, even reckless, plan. A thought struck her like lightning. Was the Marauders' true objective merely to plunder Bear Island? What if their aim was to seize Bear Island as a springboard, bypassing Deepwood Motte, and stealthily advance towards the relatively defenseless Winterfell? If they were to capture the women and children of House Stark, a chill coursed through Daisy's spine. The entire North would be thrown into a state of alarm, caught in a precarious situation. The Stark family is the backbone of the North. Should their stronghold be taken and their heir abducted, the resistance forces in the North would likely descend into chaos. Without the North's steadfast and formidable support, how many would genuinely heed Robert, that usurper, sitting upon the Iron Throne? At that juncture, should Balon's backers align their efforts, it may not be entirely improbable to incite a greater upheaval, toppling Robert's rule. At the very least, it could plunge the Seven Kingdoms into turmoil once more, allowing the Iron Islands to reap the rewards from the chaos. The reality of the power struggle is far more terrifying and intricate than the tales suggest. Daisy inhaled the frigid air deeply, striving to regain her composure. She found herself ensnared in a vortex and must exercise utmost caution, leaving no room for carelessness. Bear Island could no longer remain the passive territory, merely enduring tragic sacrifices. Regarding her transformation into a woman, Daisy tilted her head slightly, gazing into the blurred copper mirror beside her bed. The reflection revealed a face that, though weary and marred, still radiated an undeniable beauty. With deep-set eyes, a noble nose, and full lips, her features combined to create a unique allure, blending both vigor and grace. At merely 11 years of age, the nascent contours of a future beauty, capable of captivating kingdoms, are already discernible. Indeed, she could almost weep at her own reflection. A soft, self-deprecating chuckle escaped her lips, infused with a blend of novelty and complexity. Raising her hand, she gently placed it upon her slightly swollen chest, the sensation both tender and tangible. Is it truly remarkable to possess such allure at this tender age? The genes of the North, perhaps? She shook her head, casting aside a flicker of inexplicable embarrassment. After all, in this world, power and charm are never confined by gender. The figures of Daenerys and Cersei from the tales, those queens and would-be queens, who among them has not evoked admiration or fear from both men and women alike? Having arrived at this juncture, endowed with such a foundation and strength, the path ahead is surely mine to carve. While the notion of saving the world may be overly grand, rallying a few appealing allies, uniting some dependable companions, can never be amiss. Gradually, her thoughts coalesced, and a semblance of strength returned to her body. Daisy braced herself on her arms, rising from the frigid bed. Outside the window, the stars twinkled, and Bear Island lay in slumber beneath the night sky, yet it also harbored the potential for rejuvenation. She understood that her respite had come to an end. A multitude of tasks awaited her attention. In the 16th chapter of the Bear Island Empress of the Game of Thrones, titled Blood Sacrifice, Part 1, the cold moon hung high, its frosty luminescence cascading down upon the ancient heart tree, the fishbeam tree of Bear Island, casting it in an increasingly vigorous and enigmatic light. The gnarled trunk resembled the twisted arms of a giant, straining toward the pitch-black heavens. The canopy bore a face, formed by knots and fissures, oscillating between sorrow and joy. Intermittently revealed in the flowing shadows of the moon, the hollow eye sockets seemingly piercing through time and space, gazing down upon the diminutive beings gathered below. All those capable of movement upon the island had assembled. They stood in solemn silence around the clearing encircling the heart tree, a dense throng of men, women, the elderly, and even some adolescents. Many bore blood-stained bandages, their faces marred by unhealed wounds or scorched marks, their eyes entwined with profound sorrow, the bewilderment of survival, and an undeniable, primal stirring ignited by blood and fire. The air was thick with a weighty, almost suffocating stillness, broken only by the chilling wind whispering through the treetops and the suppressed breaths of the crowd. At the center of the clearing knelt over 400 captives of the Ironborn, bound by coarse ropes, stripped of their former swagger as marauders. They trembled in the biting cold, akin to lambs awaiting slaughter, their eyes filled with dread of the unknown fate that loomed before them and in utter despair. The biting chill and the multitude of icy, hateful gazes surrounding them instilled a fear deeper than any blade could evoke. With her mother, Lady Maege, still gravely injured and unconscious, Daisy Mormont assumed the mantle of presiding over this grim judgment of blood. She stood before the massive, gnarled roots of the heart tree, as if positioned at the crossroads of ancient power and contemporary suffering. She shed her battle-worn armor, donning a pristine, deep gray woolen gown, cinched at the waist, and draped with a somewhat weathered bearskin jacket, exuding an air of simplicity and solemnity. Her abundant black hair was simply gathered at the nape of her neck, revealing a pale yet sharply defined profile, breathtakingly beautiful, exuding an aura of unassailable majesty. At her waist hung two finely crafted steel swords, their hilts wrapped in non-slip leather. symbolizing might and judgment. Behind her, like stars surrounding the moon, stood Donna, Alyssa, and over 100 core warriors, their gazes sharp and resolute, having survived relentless bloodshed. They were the backbone of Bear Island, as well as the witnesses and executors of tonight's decree. Children of Bear Island. Daisy's voice resonated, not soaring but exceptionally clear, piercing through the frigid night air, soothing the restless hearts of all present. The Iron Hooves have trampled our homeland. The fanatics have defiled our sacred tree and slaughtered our kin. This land is soaked with the blood of our fathers, brothers, sisters, and children. Her words were simple, yet steeped in sorrow, evoking the deepest pain within each listener, as low sobs began to echo through the crowd. Blood debts must be repaid in blood. Daisy's voice suddenly grew fierce, like an unsheathed ice blade. The old gods are watching us. They behold this desecrated land, these executioners with bloodied hands. With a swift turn, she unsheathed her sword half a foot, the cold gleam catching the moonlight, pointing directly at the trembling captives. Bring forth those beasts whose hands are stained with the blood of innocent women and children. The crowd silently parted, creating a pathway, reminiscent of Moses parting the sea, revealing 200 iron men bound and isolated behind. These individuals had been preliminarily identified by survivors for committing especially heinous acts, such as the brutal slaughter of prisoners, the violation of women, and the massacre of the old and weak. The trial commenced. There were no lengthy accusations, no hypocritical rituals, only silent actions and the release of suppressed hatred to the utmost degree. An elderly fisherman, his hair graying and back hunched, trembled as he drew a rusted yet sharpened harpoon from his waist, the tool his son had once wielded to brave the tempest and provide for the family. He walked step by step to confront an Iron Man, his face adorned with a grotesque sea serpent tattoo, his gaze menacing. This Iron Man had, before his very eyes, cleaved his beloved wife with an axe as she attempted to shield their 6-year-old granddaughter during the raid on Frozen Fish Village. In the old fisherman's clouded eyes, there were no tears, only a profound silence, an abyss of madness and a desire for destruction. He emitted a sound unlike that of a human, a beastly growl, summoning all the remaining strength within him to plunge the harpoon fiercely into the Iron Man's chest. The Iron Man let out a piercing scream, his body convulsing violently. The old fisherman clutched the handle of his harpoon with unwavering tenacity, as if he had pinned a venomous fish to the ground. It was only when his opponent's eyes bulged and life ebbed away that he collapsed, as if all his spirit had been instantly drained. He clung tightly to the bloodied harpoon and unleashed a heart-wrenching wail, a sound that bore the weight of unspeakable anguish and a tinge of emptiness after vengeance. A young widow, her once delicate features marred by a grotesque scar, a remnant of a whip's cruel lash, approached a stout, terrified Iron Man. This man had callously desecrated her husband's corpse in her presence. Armed only with a jagged piece of black reef stone, salvaged from the shore, she advanced towards him. In the face of his desperate gaze and muffled pleas for mercy, she raised the stone high, her eyes void yet resolute. With a mechanical ferocity, she brought it crashing down upon his face and head, each sickening thud echoing like the cracking of bones, until his visage transformed into an indistinguishable mass of flesh and blood. Only then did she relinquish the stone, now stained with crimson and ivory, and slowly kneel beneath the vast roots of the heart tree. She clasped her face tightly in her hands, her shoulders trembling violently, yet stubbornly refraining from uttering a single sob. Silent tears seeped through her fingers. In another scene, a boy who had lost his legs during a defensive battle sat in a rudimentary wooden wheelchair, pushed by his resolute 10-year-old sister. They confronted a small Iron Man leader, a man who had once paraded the boy's father in chains, subjecting him to the utmost humiliation. The boy's pallid countenance belied the seething hatred burning within his eyes, a fire far beyond his tender years. Clutching a battered curved knife he had seized, he summoned every ounce of remaining strength and hurled the blade fiercely. It spun through the air, glinting ominously, and plunged deep into the officer's thigh artery, unleashing a gushing fountain of blood. The officer emitted a shriek akin to that of a slaughtered pig, writhing in agony upon the ground, convulsing. The boy's gaze remained fixed upon him, cold as iron, until the officer gasped his last breath, his body stiffening in death. Only then did the boy slowly close his eyes, tears of scalding sorrow streaming silently down his pale cheeks, an expression of triumph for avenging his father, intertwined with the grief of his own shattered existence. Revenge unfolded beneath the ancient fish beam, manifesting in the most primal, direct, and brutal manner. Axes cleaved, knives pierced, stones struck, throats were throttled. Each perpetrator met their end at the hands of those closest to their victims, who bore the deepest scars of suffering. There were no cheers. Only the profound silence that follows the completion of vengeance, a stillness punctuated by wails or numbed silence. The robust roots of the heart tree seemed to come alive, greedily siphoning the warm, sin-laden blood that seeped into the frozen earth. On the wooden visage, there appeared an ineffable and eerie satisfaction, as if it had partaken deeply of the essence of life. The air was thick with an overwhelming stench of blood and death, intermingled with the heart tree's distinctive, subtle aroma of melancholic wood, creating a disquieting atmosphere that sent shivers through the soul. As the final, agonizing cry of the dying faded into the mournful chill of the wind, 200 corpses, each of varied form, lay sprawled beneath the gnarled roots of the tree. Dark crimson blood flowed like countless serpentine vermilion snakes, seeping into the frozen soil beneath the roots and climbing along the ancient, deeply etched bark, saturating it as if draping the venerable tree in a breathtaking shroud of sanguine silk. Daisy's gaze slowly shifted to the remaining 200 Iron Men captives who had participated in the battle but, according to survivor accounts, had not directly perpetrated violence against civilians. Their faces were paler than the snow below, their teeth chattering uncontrollably, their bodies trembling like leaves in a tempest. Many had already soiled themselves, cold urine freezing into hard, unyielding shards by the biting wind, compounding their humiliation and chill. Do you see this? This is the judgment of the old gods. This is the will of Bear Island. Blood debts have been repaid in blood. Her voice paused momentarily, allowing the horrifying imagery and words to strike each captive's heart like a sledgehammer. Then, she slowly drew another finely crafted steel sword from her waist, the two blades crossing under the moonlight, glimmering with a cold, lethal radiance. Now, it is your turn to choose. Her voice suddenly rose, infused with an irresistible authority. Do you wish to live? Very well. The tip of her sword pointed toward the roots of the heart tree, greedily absorbing the fresh blood, glistening with a dark red sheen. Face it. Face the old gods who have witnessed all, and face the abyssal god you claim to worship, if any faith remains in your hearts. Swear the most vile blood oath. From this moment forth, your lives and souls belong solely to me, Daisy Mormont. Betrayers shall be obliterated, their essence cast into a darkness colder than the icy sea. She surveyed the group of captives, their spirits on the brink of collapse, and asked each word with a heavy weight. Now, tell me your choice. Silence. An oppressive silence. Only the sound of the cold wind passing through the blood-stained treetops echoed like the wails of tormented souls. Suddenly, a young Iron Man captive, still bearing traces of youth upon his face, succumbed first to despair, collapsing to his knees, his forehead striking the cold, blood-soaked ground with a heavy thud. His voice, hoarse and distorted, cried out, I swear. Witness me, abyssal god, witness me, old gods. I, Duran, offer my life and soul to Lady Daisy Mormont. In this life and the next, I shall never betray. Should I violate this oath, may I never find rebirth. As if toppling the first domino, the sound of desperate kneeling echoed in succession, a cacophony of fervent oaths rising in a chaotic yet clear wave of allegiance. I swear. Old gods above, I shall serve Lady Daisy unto death. The drowned god is dead, the old gods live on. I swear. Loyalty to Lady Daisy. I swear. This life belongs to the lady. 200 voices, imbued with profound fear and reverence for death, intertwined with a flicker of desperate hope for survival, reverberated beneath the blood-stained night sky. Excellent. Daisy commanded sharply, yet oaths must be inscribed through action. She gestured to Hakken. The warriors cast forth a pile of confiscated iron axes before the surrendering soldiers with a resounding clang. Take up the axes. Daisy's voice cracked like a whip through the air. With the blood of your former comrades, validate the oaths you have just sworn. Sever their heads. Pile them beneath the heart tree. This is the blood rite you must undertake to join Bear Island. Let the blood of your enemies replace the sea of your faith. Prove your irrevocable severance from the past. A moment of heavy silence ensued. The surrendering soldiers gazed upon the freshly executed, warm corpses, their eyes flitting over familiar and unfamiliar faces, a tumult of instinctual compassion and fear flickering within them. Yet the desire to survive, coupled with Daisy's palpable pressure and the frigid gazes of the Bear Islanders, ultimately crushed all hesitation. To live, they contorted their faces, trembling, yet resolutely grasped the heavy axes from the ground. Crack, crack. The sickening sound of flesh and bone parting resonated through the still night, piercing and even overpowering the wind's whispers. Heads were severed, blood spraying forth, rolling amidst the gnarled roots of the heart tree. their hollow or terrified eyes vacantly staring into the chilling moonlight. The viscous blood erupted like a miniature fountain, gushing even more fervently upon the already crimson-stained trunk, seeping into the earth below, as if the heart tree bathed in a torrential rain of blood. The nauseating stench of blood thickened to the point of tangibility, ascending into the heavens, while even the high-hanging moon seemed to be veiled by a faint sanguine halo. As the final head fell, joining the others to form a small, horrific, yet solemn altar of skulls, the entire scene descended into a deeper, more eerie silence. Moonlight filtered through the blood-smeared branches of the heart tree, casting mottled shadows upon the clotted pools of blood, the headless corpses, and the kneeling throng. The wind appeared to hold its breath at that moment. Daisy Mormont stepped forward, her boots unapologetically sinking into the viscous, slippery pool of blood with a soft sound. She stood before the altar built of 200 enemy skulls. Beneath the ancient heart tree, now drenched in blood, seemingly alive, exuding a dense aura of life or death, she slowly raised the bloodied longsword in her hand, its blade shimmering with an eerie glow under the moonlight, pointing towards the southern Iron Islands. Children of Bear Island. Her voice resounded once more, this time akin to the furious, surging tides of an icy sea, poised to shatter the rocks. And you, the newly chosen members who opted for survival and loyalty. Her gaze swept over her warriors, over those islanders whose eyes burned with the flames of vengeance, finally resting upon the blood-soaked, trembling Ironborn soldiers, kneeling on the ground like fragile newborns, filled with fear. The blood spilled this night is merely the beginning. It is but the first installment we demand from the Greyjoy family, from all those who trample upon the North. Her voice suddenly soared. Remember the taste of this blood. Remember the power of this hatred. Remember the oath sworn under the watchful eyes of the old gods this night. The edge of her sword carved a cold, resolute arc in the moonlight, as if to sever the distant horizon along with all enemies. One day, my declaration shall resonate like a prophecy, echoing through the heavens. I shall personally lead the forces of Bear Island, claiming the head of that old scoundrel Balon Greyjoy and the dog-ass head of his son, the Kraken's bane, if he is not drowned. Her voice rolled like a series of thunderclaps, each blow heavier than the last. To honor all our fallen kin, to cleanse the shame of Bear Island today, we shall demand from the Greyjoy family the repayment of all blood debts owed to the North for a millennium. Vengeance. Don El-Ain was the first to unleash a thunderous roar, his bloodied hammer crashing into the pool of blood, splattering crimson droplets. Vengeance. I vow to follow the Valkyrie of the icy sea. Hackenstone Beach and all the battle-hardened warriors echoed with a deafening roar, their weapons striking the ground, shaking the very earth. Vengeance. Repayment of blood debts. The islanders, having lost their kin, unleashed their long-suppressed fury like a dormant volcano erupting. Tears streaming down their faces as they raised their fists, their cries merging into a sea of hatred. Even those Ironborn soldiers, who had just severed the heads of their comrades, stunned and disoriented, were utterly captivated by the overwhelming bloodlust, the collective fervor, and Daisy's irresistible, divine presence, unintentionally joining in with indistinct yet fervent shouts, as if striving to sever ties with the past entirely. Just as the cacophony reached its zenith, a deep, resonant hum, indescribable yet grand, seemed to emanate from the earth's core, reverberating from the very heart of the ancient tree. This sound was not loud, yet it penetrated through all the clamor with remarkable clarity, sinking directly into the depths of every soul, rendering all roars, cries, and shouts abruptly silent. The people gazed upwards in horror, their eyes fixed upon the heart tree. Before her stood the colossal fishleaf tree, nourished by the blood of 400 iron men. Upon its trunk, a wooden visage emerged, a face that was merely a product of nature's design. Deep within its hollow eye sockets, a faint yet striking azure radiance flickered to life, akin to the purest ice crystals, illuminating the darkness with an eerie brilliance. It was as if ghostly flames had ignited in the shadows, cold and enigmatic. Almost immediately, the other eye socket followed suit, igniting with a similar ethereal glow. On this night of sacrificial intertwining of blood and fire, under the witness of all the denizens of Bear Island, and amidst the vow of vengeance from the Valkyrie of the ice sea, the eye of the heart tree truly opened. All who knelt, be they the people of Bear Island or the Ironborn subjugates, felt a primal shudder of reverence and dread surge through their very souls, akin to a chilling current coursing through their bodies, compelling them to bow deeply, unable to meet the gaze of those azure eyes. Daisy Mormont raised her head, her exquisite visage bathed in moonlight and the glow of blood, her dark eyes reflecting the otherworldly azure gaze. In that moment, it seemed as if countless threads of fate intertwined beneath the ancient heart tree, taught and directed towards a future fraught with peril and infinite possibilities. Chapter 19. The Oracle? Part 1. Darkness is not an absolute void. The abruptly opened azure eyes of the heart tree seared into her consciousness, becoming the sole beacon of light amidst her descent into oblivion. In that instant of sinking awareness, she did not plummet into a dreamless abyss. Instead, she was seized by an overwhelming, intangible force laced with the scent of decaying wood and ancient frost, dragging her toward a bizarre and fragmented realm. Here, the echoes of memories faded away. There was no stench of the ice-kissing cliff, no flames of the bare hall, no battlefield drenched in blood and gore. Instead, she found herself in an endless pale forest, twisting and writhing in the void. The immense, grotesquely shaped fish-leaf trees curled and intertwined, their bark adorned with countless faces, no longer mere wooden lumps, but rather vivid, contorted, and silent screams of agony, confusion, and eternal sorrow. The air was thick and palpable, laden with the dust of time's decay and the piercing echoes of countless souls' wails, suffocating in its intensity. Above this pale forest, a deeper shadow loomed. A colossal outline of a crow, vast as a cloud descending from the heavens, obscuring the shifting sky. It possessed 3 eyes. The 2 on either side were as black as eternal night, while the central eye, a molten core of ice, shimmered in azure depths, reflecting the cold trajectories of stars' births and deaths, and the cyclical nature of epochs, imbued with an ancient indifference that instinctively froze the souls of the insignificant. It gazed down upon Daisy's consciousness, which appeared as a mere mote of dust in its presence. A voice resonated directly within the core of Daisy's awareness, not transmitted through her eardrums, but akin to a frigid stream, forcefully infiltrating her mind with an irresistible will. The voice was neither male nor female, neither old nor young, resonating with countless, overlapping echoes, akin to a myriad of desiccated leaves rubbing against each other in the eternal chill of the wind, husky and hollow. The emissary of the ancient gods, the Raven of Time, was present. The consciousness that claimed to be the 3-eyed raven spoke with a grandeur that was frigid and devoid of emotion, proclaiming irrevocable laws. With the purifying blood that cleansed the filth of the drowned god, you nourished the roots of the silent tree of the heart, allowing the ancient gaze of the old god to pierce through the mists of time and space, once more bestowing pity upon this forsaken, dying land. Daisy's soul trembled violently beneath this intangible, vast pressure, as if it might shatter at any moment. Yet a fierce, unyielding will, born from Cunxiao's martial spirit, intertwined with her pride as a traveler, instinctively tightened her consciousness. She spoke not a word, but stood defiantly in the void of awareness, gazing stubbornly at the 3 eyes that overlooked all beings, particularly the deep blue ice core at the center of the forehead, seemingly capable of perceiving past and future. You were not a mere happenstance. The raven's voice bore an indifference that suggested an understanding of all causality, as if stating an already inscribed truth. Long before your conception, your soul had been marked by the threads of fate. You are the chosen hand, the fearless hammer that will shatter all dark barriers before the Savior, the vanguard blade that will cleanse the world of filth, paving the way for the true Emperor. The Savior? The Emperor's hand? The blade that sweeps the universe? This sudden oracle brought neither glory nor revelation. Instead, it suffocated her with an overwhelming sense of invisible shackles, a vehement aversion to having her destiny manipulated by others. The immense shadow of the 3-eyed raven seemed to fade after delivering its proclamation, like ink dissolving in water. Only the deep blue ice core eye lingered, casting one last penetrating gaze into Daisy's consciousness, as if it pierced through her soul, uncovering something deeper, accompanied by an indescribable scrutiny, or perhaps something else. Remember your place, Daisy Mormont. You are the sharpest sword, not the hand that wields it. In the future, when the long night descends and the cold god awakens, the true Savior will tread upon the snow, and you will be the unparalleled blade that guards their throne and vanquishes their foes. Do not forget or betray this. The voice gradually dissipated, along with the pale forest, the silent, screaming faces of the tree, and the immense shadow of the raven, quickly vanishing into the depths of consciousness like retreating tides. Daisy abruptly sat upright on the hard bed, her body feeling as if it had just been pulled from the icy sea, drenched in cold sweat. Her heart raced violently within her chest, nearly shattering her ribs as it sought to leap from her throat. Outside, the sky was dimly lit, gray-white light filtering through the gaps in the wooden planks, casting cold, clear streaks of brightness upon the floor. She gasped for breath, attempting to calm her nearly uncontrollable heartbeat and tumultuous thoughts. Deity? Destiny? Three-eyed raven? Savior? The entire scene was as absurd as the most fantastical of dreams. However, the chilling sensation, the resounding voice, and especially the piercing gaze of those cerulean eyes were all so palpably real that they sent shivers down one's spine. Amidst the chaos, an extraordinary revelation emerged, perhaps a buried memory stirred by this supernatural experience, rising like pearls from the darkness, crystal clear in its connection to her father. This figure, elegant and warm, with eyes often adorned with a gentle smile reminiscent of the southern sea breeze, was no rugged warrior from the north, nor could he be classified within any known noble lineage of Westeros. Fragments of memory pieced together his origin. Over a decade ago, a bizarre merchant vessel, almost disintegrated, had cast him ashore upon the death-laden rocks of Bear Island. Severely injured and on the brink of death, it was her mother, Maege, the Rose of Bear Island, who only knew the ways of swordplay at the time, who dragged this mysterious castaway back to the Great Hall. He survived, quietly transforming the Great Hall with his astonishing erudition and unique gentle demeanor, mastering a form of herbal medicine distinct from that of scholars. He also possessed the artistry of writing in beautiful square characters, now understood by Daisy to be the ancient Chinese script from a distant eastern land. He and her mother, over time, developed a deep affection, ultimately leading him to take the name of the Mormont family, becoming the enigmatic husband of Lady Maege, a figure scarcely known or understood by the outside world. Chapter 20, The Oracle? Part 2. A warm smile instinctively curved the corners of Daisy's lips. In her memories, her father's fingers, long and steady, would clasp her small hand beside the flickering warmth of the hearth in the Great Hall, patiently inscribing exquisite characters upon smooth stone with water. His deep, melodious voice would elucidate the meaning and stories behind each word, imparting the ancient wisdom of compassion, courage, intellect, and resilience. He cherished calling her a day, his tone imbued with affection. He taught her to recognize herbs, sharing that life, like flora, ebbs and flows, and that one must remain resilient, yet accept the natural course of existence. He spoke of celestial movements, offering insights that were often unique and profound, frequently uttering remarkable truths that diverged from scholarly teachings. It was his distinctive, gentle nature and the vast knowledge seemingly drawn from another realm that subtly nurtured the sisters, endowing them not only with a beauty that surpassed their mother's wild and untamed elegance, but also with a delicate and exquisite countenance. Their mother might be described as spirited and fierce, while the sisters' unparalleled beauty was more akin to their father's refined depth. More importantly, he bestowed upon them a unique perspective of the world and a heart unbound by the constraints of convention. The absurd rumors surrounding Lady Maege's marriage to the head of the Bears stemmed, to some extent, from the North's complete ignorance and subconscious aversion to this incongruous outsider. The presence of her father was like a hidden spring beneath the frozen soil of Bear Island, silently yet profoundly warming and shaping their inner worlds. Until 2 years ago, a sudden fever, perhaps linked to his grievous injuries from youth, claimed him, much like his quiet arrival, rendering him unable to witness the birth of his younger sister, Lyanna. In a hushed tone, Daisy murmured of distant lands, perhaps even more enigmatic realms to the east, her fingertips unconsciously tracing the familiar contours of characters on the cold wooden floor. The origins of her father may be far more extraordinary than she had ever imagined. As her thoughts returned to the present, all confusion and shock were swiftly subdued. The grand and icy proclamation of the three-eyed raven, the imperial hand, the savior's warhammer, and the unparalleled blade that guards the throne ignited within her not a sense of reverence, but a surging tide of defiant pride and fierce rebellion. What of the deities? They tower above, viewing mortals as mere pawns, whimsically orchestrating the trajectory of destinies. The so-called savior had long been predetermined within the script of fate. According to the tales she knew, it would likely fall upon Bran of House Stark or the uniquely positioned Jon Snow. Yet she, Daisy Mormont, despite possessing extraordinary strength and exceptional talent, was ultimately regarded by them as merely a tool and enforcer to clear the path for the child of destiny. This unyielding pride, stemming from a soul of another world, collided fiercely with the indomitable spirit of her ancestral Bear Island lineage, merging into a silent yet resolute laughter deep within her soul. The imperial hand? My fate is mine to command. Why should I rely on another? The savior? If destiny dictates, this act of salvation may very well be transferred. This throne need not remain occupied by the same. However, Daisy was no fool. The machinations of the deities were unfathomable, their power beyond the reach of mortals. The pride and indignation she felt must be buried deep within her heart. Much like the seasoned hunter of the north conceals his winter provisions, never to be revealed. Regardless of their schemes, Daisy clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms, delivering a sharp sting that sharpened her mind to a cold clarity. No matter the extent of the apocalyptic calamity brought forth by the so-called long night and the god of winter, she murmured softly, imbued with undeniable determination. Absolute power is the only reliance I have to protect this land beneath my feet, safeguard my kin behind me, and break free from all shackles of fate. Her personal martial prowess must swiftly amalgamate the fierce tenacity of Cunxiao with the enduring resilience of her ancestral bloodline, reaching a realm of transcendence. The foundation of her power, land, populace, resources, and elite warriors, must be amassed and strengthened at all costs. She turned, her gaze falling upon the two steel warhammers leaning against the wall. In the morning light, the cold edges of the hammerheads gleamed with a dark yet solid luster, embodying a tangible and authentic strength within her grasp. The deity's chessboard, the savioress' divine mandate, the possible impending cataclysm. A sharp, fierce curve slowly emerged at the corners of Daisy's mouth. Then let it come, she whispered, her voice so faint that it seemed only she could hear it, yet imbued with a resolve potent enough to sever steel and alter fate. Whether her adversary was a lofty deity, a demon emerging from the abyss, or this accursed force attempting to bind her destiny, she approached the warhammer, bent down, and resolutely grasped its cold, weighty handle. A familiar sensation coursed through her, awakening a profound sense of strength. The fate of me, Daisy Mormont, and the survival and prosperity of my bare island shall be determined solely by the hammer in my hand and the fire in my heart.